Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 3. I just wanted to drop a quick programming note to remind you that you can reach out with questions or comments on Instagram at bigbadfigcast, all one word. And I will continue to post links relative to the discussion in the show notes, Instagram post, and on YouTube. Today's episode is one I'm really excited to share, and I hope this interview with Phoenix Customs provides you with some insight on both their creative process and the challenges involved in running a premium custom brand. Lastly, in the show notes, I put a direct link to a November 2021 interview of Phoenix by the Bricks and Banter podcast. It's a great episode by a great show that you should definitely check out as it provides additional insight into Phoenix's early days and how this all came to be. Alrighty, with that being said, let's do it.
Bring me the next shiny new thing. Bring me the next shiny new thing. Bring me the next shiny new thing. Bring me the next shiny new thing.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Big Bad Figcast. I'm your host, Brett, also known as Geek Over 40, and co-hosting today is Phil, returning from episode 2, otherwise known as Phil Fat Cat Bricks.
Hey guys.
And along with Phil, we've been blessed to be joined by arguably the most well-known brand creator of custom minifigures. I know him as Adam, but you will know him as Phoenix Customs. Thanks for coming on, Adam.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Brett. Good to be here.
Yep. And Adam, you're part of the closed circle that got a chance to preview episodes 1 and 2 before they went public.
Yes. Fantastic stuff. Yep. That was awesome.
So I appreciate your discretion until we reveal this in about 4 more days on the Geek Exchange.
You got it. Zipped.
All right, so we've gave you the opportunity to be in the hot seat, or get the questions ahead of time, and you chose to be brave.
Hot seat it is, baby.
Yeah.
Let's do it on the fly.
Yeah, well, I can't piss you off, man. This is to give me credibility. I need you on this podcast, man.
Hey, man, nothing will get me going, man. I love this stuff. So,
you know what? Actually, I'm going to skip to my very last question. Does your family know how big of a deal you are in this hobby? Or are you just dad who makes some figs?
Yeah, I'm dad that makes figs for the most part. It's just every so often. Here's a funny story. So I live in Minneapolis or Minnesota. And so the closest Lego store is up in the Mall of America. And about, I want to say it was 4 years ago, we went with my son, my mom, my dad, and I think it was my daughter. My wife wasn't with us at the trip. And anyway, we went to the Lego store. And we're checking things out, just oohing and ahhing everywhere. And my mom was outside with my daughter because she was kind of bored, so she just started building stuff because they had these little buildable stations, things like that. And this dad was sitting there talking with my mom about things, and all of a sudden he leans over, and this is what my mom tells me. Leans over, he's like, "You think these are cool? You got to check out some of these custom things they make nowadays. They're just unbelievable." And he shows my mom one of my figures. And she goes, "That's my son." And the guy literally like drops his jaw. He's like, "Shut up." And he was, so my mom was like, "Yeah, let's go say hi to him." And he was like grabbing him and bringing him into the store. And all of a sudden I walk over and the guy's like, "You're Phoenix Customs." I was like, "Yeah, I'm Adam." But yeah. And then I introduced myself, said, "Hey, thanks for, the follow, blah, blah, blah." And and my mom was like, "That guy was really into your stuff. Are you, like, how did he know you?" And I was like, "Well, I guess he's," and then all of a sudden another guy heard that from the store and walked out and he's like, "So I overheard, are you Phoenix Custom?" So like 2 people in the store walked up to me and started saying, like, introducing themselves. And one of them was like, "I'm a huge fan." And my mom was like, I think you're kind of a big thing maybe. And I was like, no, it's just luck. But yeah, it's always with the kids, they don't quite believe it. But my wife is starting to believe. And my daughter is too now, just because she knows, when she saw on Instagram, she's like, because she has an Instagram account and she just kind of checked it out for funsies. She was like, "Dad, you have like 18,000 subscribers. Like, that's crazy." I was like, "Yeah, it's kind of crazy, isn't it?" And she's like, "Yeah, I've never seen that many for, a hobby." I was like, "Yeah, I guess so." And my wife is always, she's always surprised at how many things, like when I used to run the website, how many things I'd be shipping within a month or 2, and just like, "You ship that much stuff? People buy that much?" I was like, "Yeah." So but it's still every day. It's kind of like, well, did you clean up? Did you do this? And like, oh, do your Lego hobby, whatever.
So,
So
well, if you want to impress her, I mean, get your butt to Brick Fair. Finally,
I
do
know,
it.
I know. I've been saying that to every single person I chat with about like that's the last thing I have not quite. It's kind of like this divergent thing. There's like this online community that's my space. That's kind of where I'm inhabiting. With Phil and all this old school folks from the Flickr days, all the way up till the Instagram days, I guess you could call it. And then there's like the convention folks and the mockers and the modders and all that. And there's a space I'm sure between there, but I've just never quite gotten to the conventions. And it's always, I swear, every year I tell myself, okay, this is the year, because I used to live down in Peoria, Illinois, which is only 2 hours from Chicago, and Brick World Chicago was every year. And every year, I swear, I'd say to the kids, "We're going there." One year, my kid got sick on the way there, like about an hour out, so we had to turn around and go home. Another time, my daughter, we remembered she had this recital, so we had to turn back and go to. There's always some stupid excuse every year, but yeah, I got to find my way to one of those, either Brick Fair or Brick World, or I guess there's a Brick Fest coming this year to St. Paul that I've actually bought tickets for, so maybe I'm actually locked into that one finally, but we'll see. I need to do that for sure.
And it doesn't count until it's Brick Fair, Virginia.
I know, right? Yeah.
That's like 10 minutes from my work.
Every time I hear people say that's the place to go, that it's the best one. But yeah,
You want to get practicing your signature, Adam? You'll be signing figs all day long.
Oh my God, eBay would blow up.
Well,
I don't want to think
funny.
about it.
I wrote. It's funny that you mentioned that. I one time just wrote a little note to somebody sending their fig late, I think it was, just saying like thanks for your patience, and then sign my name after that. And one of my friends on Instagram goes, "Do you know that this hit on eBay and this made the figure sell for like $50 more?" I'm like, "What? No way!"
It's hilarious. It's
so
sad,
funny.
but it's hilarious.
It is, and I think it's so funny because it's like, no, it's just me scribbling, but okay.
Going into something a little less lighthearted, I'm going to be remiss if I didn't ask this one question that everyone's going to ask. Now, the timing couldn't have been more perfect because this morning you actually put out an update. The latest
okay.
status with the Rex Spideys. Now,
Oh yeah,
you've been very transparent on the timetable with your Instagram stories, but I
Try
kind
to
of
be,
want, no, you've always been great about it. But I wanted to give you the floor to address maybe some of the production nuances that collectors may not be aware of, such as Rex's current limitations on simultaneous printing. I was wondering if you could just give us a little more insight, because you are a brand that a lot of new collectors gravitate towards, and they may not understand how some of these things work.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm flattered you say that. First of all, yeah, I think that's a frustration. I honestly am on the same page with the collectors. It's very frustrating when something that you think would be straightforward, easy, something you can get done quickly, if you look at it compared to like other figs with parts and all that kind of things. But the first thing I want to say is a lot of people get confused when they see that. They think it's my figure, which, that was kind of when I was in the middle of transitioning away from selling exclusive figures that are mine to where I'm designing figures for other brands / collabs. And Rex is one of those that actually has his own, he has his own production and printing group that he works with. So I basically made the design for him. He takes it after the sales went in and he brings it to his production and they kind of produce it on their own. Whereas, most of the collabs, I'd say probably 75% of the collabs, and actually once Rex gets caught up, his collabs with me will all go to my production and printing that I partner with. That way it's kind of more consistent and it's also more reliable. Like we have a timetable and everything kind of gets in line and gets pushed through. And the nice thing is my production is varied. It's in different locations, which during COVID was huge. We found that out right away that, if we're only in one location, you get screwed if, for shutdowns, COVID and all that kind of thing. But because of that and related to that, Rex and his production literally had probably some of the worst luck you could ever have. And also on top of that, he can only print 1 or 2 jobs at a time, depending on, because his production he works with apparently prints with a whole slew of other things, not just Lego. And so he's kind of limited that way. And they're not as attuned to the needs of like the Lego community and the customs community. Whereas a lot of companies you see kind of make deals and they work with a lot of Lego. So they just know that. And so that's the first thing. The second thing to note is that he just literally, if you look at all the history of all the people that were printing over COVID, they got maybe hit with one delay or so. I've never seen any company like his that got hit with like 3 or 4 in a row. And I even saw the messages he would forward them to me, because I was like, after the third time, I was like, this sounds like a joke. And he'd send me the message from his directly so I could read it, what was going on. And so I think the problem is, whereas my production companies adapted and moved to different places so they could have more reliability to get things done and move things as need be, his was kind of stubborn and just stayed in this one area. That China, in China, they have multiple lockdowns, and when they lock down full on, whereas you can't do anything until COVID's pretty much down to zero. At least this was before the last wave, which kind of changed their approach. But so Rex has kind of been hit with 3 different times where they had to close down, and for the first time they actually were closed for 3 months. Because of that, as you know, when you kind of start up, you take a while to get going again. And once you get going, the first time they locked down, we were halfway. I want to say we were halfway. No, we got all the way done with the, what the heck is it? The one from Loki, the character we did from Loki. Why can't I think of his name? We got done with that one, and we were just getting started with the Black Panther figure. And then halfway through, they just shut down again. And then when they came back, they had to restart up on the helmets and kind of figure that out again. And everything is super slow. It's kind of like when kids go away for the summer for school. It's the same thing. It takes a while to get back up to speed, especially with something as complex as printing helmets, things like that. So it's just slowed everything down. So I do feel bad for all those collectors that are waiting for something that you would think would be so simple, just printing a figure. But they have to realize we kind of have to go in a row, that all these things are set up. And once those are finished, he can get the next job up on the line. And he can only do, I've really pushed that he can do 2 at a time now. He's been working on, they had the Doc Ock one, and they had the Amazing Spider-Man one kind of right there at the same time. And the Doc Ock one is very complex. If you guys have seen the render of it, each articulated part of the arm has to be connected to the next one in this series of interlocking things. So if you can count how many of those per arm, they have to put all those together for the number of people that ordered it. So it took a long time to put those things together, and they had to dedicate more workers to that too, which slowed that process down. So it's just a mess of logistics, COVID, and bad timing, and kind of bad planning on their printers' part to not diversify more in different locations so they could deal with the COVID issues. But I'm on the same wavelength as customers, believe me. And Rex is just as frustrated with his group. He doesn't know what else to do. He can't, he's locked in. You have to do down payments, things like that for these figures. You can't get those back, unfortunately, for those the 2 that we're currently working on. So those are all the issues that happen with that, and I do feel bad. The good thing is that I just announced too that the Doc Ock, I think we're finished with that one, so it should be shipping to him, and he should be getting that one out soon. The Amazing one, I think about first third of it we did the test prints to see how they lay out, and now we're doing the fine tuning with printing it and looking the colors on the parts. So hopefully that should be done in the next 2-3 weeks and get out. And he's currently getting, now that we're done with the Doc Ock, the original Arachnid ones, getting those up and going. So we're going to get caught up. Our plan is to get by the end of May all of the ones that are outstanding done. So I'm really pushing them to get that date on all of them. So then the frustrations are done. We can move on to my production and with the remaining figs. So it is frustrating though.
No, I get it. It was a perfect storm. And it's funny that with the barrage of figs that are always coming out and coming off the line at the same time, you think we'd be distracted enough to be, okay, well, that's coming when it's coming. But, some folks are on more limited budgets and they only buy one fig at a time. So that's what they're focused on. So I think that's where some of the frustration comes from.
Yeah. And on top of that, when you're seeing that he's got those figs and then people sold figs either just about the same time or even after that, and they're getting theirs done and printed out, and they just don't understand, that there's luck, a bit of that to do with it, and also just their production maybe had different locations that were hit as hard as his was. So it's just
some brands share factories, and they have to they have to put some money aside if they want to get pushed to the front of the line.
Yep, and it's an unfortunate set of events that if we all could have prepared for that, we would have put a lot of his other figures with my production who could handle that. If I would have known back then, I think I would have done that a little differently with him. But hindsight is 2020. What are you going to do? All we can do is move forward as fast and as best we can without, my biggest thing is we can't give up on quality control. That's, even if speed is really important, that's always the biggest thing. You got to stand by the work you do. So I want to make sure the work we're doing is still top notch. So I'm a big stickler on I'm kind of a perfectionist, not when it comes to those things. I do miss things here and there sometimes, but I like a look to look certain way. I like things to be positioned certain ways, so
Well,
it has that look.
that's a perfect segue into my next question. Another thing not many collectors are aware of is the unique dynamic of the fact that you guys are oceans apart, with your partners in their factories. And so I imagine that distance adds to production time because you're constantly mailing back and forth the test prints and other aspects of quality checks. And then you get your lost packages. I remember you said you have a fond distaste, I believe it was for DHL.
Oh God,
So,
DHL and yeah,
so,
Mortal Enemies. Yep.
yeah, so a lot of folks don't even realize, well, Rex is in China and you're in the States. And that adds to the production time.
Yeah, it does. But also just for mine, I've actually got it down to a T. First of all, I've forced my own production to actually only ship via FedEx. It's higher price. It sucks that way, but it's more reliable. I get it really quick, and then I can make, because they literally a lot of times will have, well, actually nowadays it's more diversified, but before it used to be where they would literally set up the prints on all these printers, do the test print, send it to me with it just sitting there waiting for my approval or adjustments, and then they'd get to printing. Whereas now it's a little more intense, so they don't do that anymore. But that's why, I'd have to wait for, 5 or 10 days, whatever, to get here, look at the packaging, take high-end or high-def pictures of things and analyze them and see how they look, compare them to the Lego colors, things like that. It's intense. I just don't think a lot of people really appreciate all the time-intensive things you have to do at each step, and that it's not just you send it to them, they produce it, it's sent to you. There's so many more steps.
And that's why we're doing this podcast and we're doing this interview, because we want to, look behind the curtain and see what's really going on and just educate, because the more educated they are, the more calm they'll be. And also the more accountable some brands will be, as they know the customers now understand what's going on.
Yeah. And I'd say more like the older collectors, like Phil, I would guarantee, I bet you've kind of had at least an idea of like what pad printing is and the difference between that and UV. Would you say that you kind of do, or at least have a general idea?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, whenever you get people sort of getting riled up about delays and things, I always try to explain, it is a process. It's project management. It's not a case of, oh, I've just drawn this picture, I'm going to send it off now and they'll send it back to me fully printed. It's there's so many steps. I mean, it's something I could never do myself. So I can fully appreciate how complex it is. So, like Brett was saying, sometimes it is just younger collectors. They're very new to the scene, and they simply just don't understand what goes into it.
Yeah,
like you've got other vendors that have got a digital printer on site, and they can just bang out designs. I mean, don't get me wrong, even that takes time. You've got to refine that design and perfect the printing each time. But when it's in, it's on site, all in house, it's much more straightforward. And I think that's where we have the biggest issue. People don't appreciate just how different one vendor's process is to another's.
Yep, exactly. And you can see the difference between, the ones that have like an exclusive deal with a printing group or is in-house with the printing group, like even works there or nearby it, versus, like me, where I'm here in the States, just little old me, contracted with groups that are, all over the world in different locations, and then working with those. Luckily, I have a background of, administration and working in bigger groups, and I even did customer service before I got into college and all that. So I have, all these things that have helped me do things on my own, but I still have to hire out all these processes. So I don't have control of those. So I do as best I can to kind of corral them all together. But for example, I think a lot of people don't get that there's a lot of steps just to get to the factory setting, where it gets to that part. And then they and me work together with a team to get things to a certain level. And then just to get to the printing going, it's a lot of steps. So you not only have to be creative to create the actual design and idea of the fig, but you have to get the parts there. You have to organize, the numbers you need so that there's enough there for the extras in case there's, some mistakes that are made. You have to have organized to make sure that you have every color listed correctly. There's so many different steps, and there's a lot of boring parts of this, but there's also some fun parts, you know, the design and the sharing of it online and discussion of it and getting feedback and seeing the finished product. But there's a lot of boring stuff in between of, you know, getting things organized, sending it in, going back and forth and communicating. It's just, and then understanding the pad print process. You know, there's so many things to it that to get it to do it well that are behind the scenes that a lot of people don't even understand.
As a self-described control freak, I can't imagine how hard that must be knowing you don't have that control overseas, because even after you say things good to go, things can still go wrong.
Oh, I'm telling you, that's the thing is, so I get a lot of people. I mean, I can't tell you the number of people, and I love it. This one of my favorite things is when I see someone at the beginning of the journey come to me and say, like, oh, you know, you've inspired me to want to do this myself. And I think I'm finally going to take the jump. What do I need to do? And the first thing I do is I tell them there's an old interview I did that kind of goes through the steps of the things that I do in order to kind of create the design and to get it to the production, what they have to keep in mind. So I tell them to look at that, and then I give them some feedback. But the first thing that they have to understand is that the design principles of Lego and kind of the proportions of things, and that's just the design aspect. And then you got to know how to do prepare it for print and understand that there's layers and how that works. And to me, the funny thing is, if I can do it, I was someone that had zero background in design. I'm one of those people that just likes to jump in and learn new things. And I mean, way back, and I talk about jumping all over the place with an answer. I originally got into this because my daughter, when she was like 8 or 9 or something like that, was playing with Legos, and she had her favorite TV show in the background, and she was like, "Dad, can you make a Lego of me and my favorite character, so I can play with them?" And I was like, "You know, I probably can. I just got to figure out how to do that." And so I literally, for the next week, found a place called Eurobricks. It took me a while, and they have this
Mhm.
tutorial on how to use different vector programs for creating vector designs. And then I'd look at how to do decaling. This is back before I did printing and knew about it, that even existed, but I found how to do decaling. And with my big fat fingers was trying to do decals on little tiny Legos for her. And I finally
Oh,
got it.
yeah, I've got a few. Bendel Bricks does a really great job, and Bud Bricks
Yes.
does. And I just every time he puts up a new decal sheet of a Spidey Trooper, I'm like, hybrid. I'm like, hey man, let me just drop you some bones, and can you do it for me?
Seriously,
There's no way I'll be able to do it.
yeah, there was some people back in the Flickr days that were really good at that. I know, let's see, the brand I was thinking of, AV Figures, I think they may still do a
They
lot
do.
of Star Wars based decal figures, and they do a great job with that. But every time I see those, I think, you know, I remember, I almost have PTSD thinking of those days when I try to get all these water slide decals
Mhm.
without ripping and all that, with using the clear coats and all those things. That's really, I mean, if you don't do that before you get into the fun stuff, which is pad printing and UV design, you just haven't lived. You know, you got to have the full experience.
Well,
But yeah,
I mentioned in I think it was episode 1, I've got like over 40 episodes planned out, and I actually do have an episode about decaling planned.
sure.
And
I mean, people,
hey, Bendel, if you're hearing this, surprise, I'm going to reach out to you and ask if you want to come on the show with Bubrix and get this all in the bigger spotlight. So, yeah, I think you already answered my next question, because we talked about Rex's limitations, and we talked about the production life cycle, but we keep throwing the term collab,
yes.
and that can mean a lot of different things to different people. So I was wondering if you can just give me the Cliff Notes version when you talk about a collab, because you've got like was it Deadpool's coming out with Brothers figure,
Yes.
your
Yep.
Thor series with GB, of
Yep.
course things going on with Rex. I mean, you're all over the place. Is the I would say that most of us guess that you're just selling the designs and providing QC. Is that accurate to say, or do you think it's a little more involved in that? What would you
So
say the collab aspect really is?
good question. So when it comes to collabing for me, at least on my end, I'm kind of a control freak, and people have kind of understood that that's how it is. So if they do collab with me, I like to do. I have my own style, so I want to do at least the figure design, and then usually what's nice about that is they can still have the parts design on their end. So, for example, I work with Jaka bricks. I work with Gold bricks. I've worked with Rex, Diamond Custom bricks, Brothers figure, and each one of those have kind of their own resources. So it depends on what their setup is. If they have their own 3D part designer, then I will say, hey, have them work on the custom parts, and let's talk about what we'd like to include. I'll work on the design, and from that point, it's just a feedback loop that we'll do each other's designs, we'll give feedback and what they'd like to see and what I'd like to see. And there's a harmonious middle ground there somewhere that we find that usually we're both happy with how the fig looks at some point. And then at that point, at least nowadays, they would put it up for sale. And all I would say is that, I helped design it, like that.
And
So they'll
I
put it at
helped.
the bottom. Yeah. And then depending again how the setup is, going forward for the most part though, I'm working all with my just to keep everything, what's the word I'm looking for, coherent from one print to the next to the next. I want to make sure that all of those have kind of the same quality and the same kind of process to go through. So it's just easier for me to control that way.
Mhm.
Everything goes through my production. But in the past, like BF would go to theirs, or when I say BF, Brothers Figure would go to theirs, Jocko would go to theirs, and Rex would go to his, and so now all of them go, if they design with me, they agree that, I'll go to my production, I'll get a quote for it, and then they sell it. And then I handle all the back end things. I'll show them, how things are going as it progresses. And then they'll send it there, or I'll send it to them when it's done, and then they package it up, put all the things out, and then they'll advertise it on their page and things. So at this point now, I get to just have, due to my, the circumstances of all the things going on around me and the fact that the website got too big, for the most part, that's all I'm kind of working on. So I can kind of do more of the fun stuff that is my niche, which
So,
is designing, producing, and making sure the figs are a certain quality.
so you're saying after this initial run of things going on and things get consolidated back to your production, you will be the person to yell at when something's delayed. That's what you're telling me.
Yes, yeah. But there is, and the nice thing is sometimes we can kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Grease the wheels a little bit when it comes to some projects. So for example, I knew that, Jocka's production had jumped up. So I wanted to make sure that we can kind of keep up with that same speed. So we kind of, found a way to kind of increase our speed by the time we work together, so that I can kind of get a 3 to 4 month spin on, as long as there's not a lot of parts involved.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to keep that up with all the other things. But, the problem is I'm such a picky, person when it comes to the colors being right and all these things, that sometimes it has to go, like imagine like a conveyor belt. All these projects are on a conveyor belt, and I pick the one up on the front of the line, and if it's good, it goes right back in the conveyor belt and keeps going, and it's done quick. Very rarely. Sometimes it'll be picked out of the line and there's something that needs to be changed, and then it has to go either in the middle of the line or all the way to the end, depending on what it is that's getting changed. So that's the problem, is why something doesn't take 4 months. If it's
not a
straightforward.
problem if the final product speaks for itself and you've been consistent. I can't think personally, I don't feel, you might be able to correct me on this. I can only think of one instance where I've seen an issue with a fig of yours, and it wasn't an issue. It was somehow just got thrown back into the box, and that's what I'm referring to as the Captain Marvel helmet. That's the
Oh, yeah,
only
yeah.
thing I can think of, but you corrected that, and just somehow the old helmets were still floating out there.
Well, yeah, there's always an issue, and the funny thing is I won't find that issue. A lot of times it's not big enough to notice, like over, if it's anything over 10, I'll notice it usually, because I have our production looks over it, and usually the distributor does like a second job. And sometimes like with gold bricks, they'll do a third job. Whereas if I used to ship it out, I was like the last line of defense and I could see most of them. But they do a really good job of looking at that. But however, there's 5 or 6 sometimes I get through of a certain defect that I don't notice until people tell me about it.
Mm.
And sometimes there's little microscopic things we can't see, because nowadays with like you guys being photographers, and you see things in such high def that sometimes we can't quite see it. So it might be something like even like a like on a, like most of the time it's a helmet issue, like, and like if something's not fitting right or something, and we've corrected all those things. But it's so tough when you're talking about how fast things can cool or not when they're parts that are injection molded. Just the little tiny variants can make the difference of how it sits on the helmet. And in that case, for the Captain Marvel one, luckily it was a large enough number that we can kind of see that they stuck, and so we were able to replace those. But yeah, it's difficult when it's not a large enough number. Sometimes you miss them, but when they are, and the funny thing is, you think it works when you have it in your hand, and then all of a sudden it goes and it sits in like a cold packaging, and then it comes
Right.
again, then it changes its dimensions, and people don't understand that does have an effect on the part itself. It's one of those things that you learn from every single time you do one. There's always some mistake that the next time you will make sure that you don't make that. I always tell my kids, I want you to make mistakes, just don't make them twice or on purpose the second or third time, like
Right.
you
Fail
should learn
fast.
from your mistakes. Right. So that's what I try to do too. So if we make a mistake, it's one of those things where I make a note of it. And if it's a big enough thing that we need to look at how we're doing things, we might change structurally how that happens, like how we mold, how we check the molds, how we see, what is, a throwaway urn versus what can be shipped and all those kind of things. And sometimes you have to tweak that. And it's just a learning process. I mean, I've been doing this for almost 10 years. No, yeah,
It'll be
almost 10 years.
10 years about August time based on that comment I showed you earlier.
Yes, yeah, I just saw that too. And someone told me about that. I had to look back on Flickr. I was like, oh man, I'm almost at the 10-year mark, so I got to plan something juicy. Yeah.
Can you make a suggestion? Give Sked
I'm
his
all
Squirrel Girl.
ears, baby.
10-year anniversary, give Sked his Squirrel Girl.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
He needs a Squirrel Girl. If
He
you're not
does.
going to do that, the only other solution we can come up with is a Spidey fig.
Yeah, that wouldn't be in you guys' wheelhouse at all. Yeah, and my house, I'm a Spidey nerd too, so yeah, I hear you. Yeah, Squirrel Girl would probably have to be on there high. I owe him that much, But yeah, and so 10 years of doing this, you make tons of mistakes over the years, and even now we're still making mistakes with production, because there's always new printers, there's always new production crews that are coming in. It's not like I've had the same crew for 10 years, so just
Going to
learn.
say Captain Marvel was early as well, wasn't it? Quite early on into your sort of jump into custom parts.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
probably my first year and a half, maybe. Yeah, it was one of those first ones that, yeah, we were still kind of getting the groove on that. Like people think you just hit the ground running and you don't. It's there's always things that stick that don't work that you think would be just fine, and then you learn from that. And that Captain Marvel one, and there's also Captain America helmet things that we had issues with.
The eye alignment was a bit low, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, and that was on the second one or first one. Yeah, first one I think it was, and then there was
no, it was the second. Yeah, it was the second.
Was it the second one? Yeah,
It was a more recent one. I was on because, like Brett said, it's very uncommon for there to be issues with your figs. You really do pay attention. But yeah, it wasn't all of them. I think you had caught it, if I remember, and some had still managed to sneak through. So some of the run had, so then sort of had to backtrack and replace them. But you had replacement parts ready because they'd been missed or something.
Yes. So the funny thing was, so my distributor, so the other thing is working with a distributor was a new thing that probably started maybe 4 years ago, something like that, to make things easier. Because I realized, here I am in the U.S. and most of my resellers are overseas. They're all of them are. There's the UK, there's Taiwan, there's Hong Kong. They're mostly over in Asia. So I found someone that can distribute for me in Asia. And once we did that, there's still, some kinks that we had to get through. One of them was, if we had to replace the head prints, which was what we did for that run, they didn't switch them out all the way. Like they didn't organize it well enough to see which one was the ones I approved and which ones were the ones I didn't approve of. And so some of the ones that were too small, like the head was too small. You can see like the mouth was too high and stuff. And I saw a couple of them in the wild. I was like, son of a, why did you do that? And so I was like, one of these slipped through, and all of a sudden, nope, 2 of them, nope, 10 of them didn't.
We need to have a word.
Right. I was like, yeah. So next time, let's be a little bit more judicious about how we separate those. So yeah, it's always a learning curve. And if you go into business of any type, there's going to be lots of learning curves, and you just have to roll with the punches and do the best you can,
Absolutely.
As long as you're honest with the customers and talk as much as you can. As a background in customer service, I always say you got to be honest with them, and whenever you make a mistake, take it on the chin. Don't be blaming other people. Don't shirk it. Always say that it's this is what it is, and just move forward. And sometimes customers aren't going to accept that. You can't. I always tell my kids you can only deal with your own behavior. You can't control the behaviors of others. So you can always try to do your best to get them on your side or to understand your point of view, and that's all there is you can do.
So regarding to what you're talking about, getting involved with parts and the complexities involved with that, there's been, since COVID, there's been a renewed interest in light, purchases or add-ons. Jen calls them plus upgrades. You recently released the Spider-Man 2 upgrade pack a little bit early. I understand.
Yeah, talk about.
You got the integrated Spidey Arms pack. The Captain America upgrade pack is coming.
Yeah.
Feelings, Firestar, GBs with weapons. All these brands are catching on with these one-off accessories. Do you feel this is something we should expect more in the future? And what would you say to those who think they see it as nothing more than a cash grab?
Well, here's the thing is I think some people always get like they have their kind of interpretation of a thing that they see that comes out. Most of the time on our side, we want to catch as many, as a business person, you want to catch as many customers as you can, obviously, but you also want to make sure it's a good quality thing. So one of the things that I have a thing being that I've been here since, I remember Phil talking on one of the last episodes about, the fact that back in the old days when we were in Flickr, you could get a figure for like $40 and it was pretty dang good, Christo and with Eclipse Graphics, that was, and even minifigs for you were saying, I remember them too. And even my early figs were pretty cheap, because we didn't have custom parts. We just used all Legos and just printed on them. And so that was at the time, you could reach a lot more people. And then when we started adding custom parts and other groups started too, that just raises the price, aka you're losing a lot of customers that loved you in the beginning or can only be, liking it from a distance and not actually purchasing because it's out of their wallet power, and I want to include as many people as I can in the love of this custom group that we have, this community. As an AFOL, it's fun to get know people involved. And so I think this light movement is great. You're involving people that can, like, for example, I think one of the best emails I've ever gotten from a customer or a comment, even both of them are comment and a customer email, were saying how they loved the fact that for the first time they've been watching me for a couple years and never were able to buy it. But when I had that accessory pack for the Arachnid, how excited they were that they could finally have a Phoenix Customs product because they could afford it. And that to me is more what I want to get as many people that can have a chance to get these. So whenever I see something, go over $100, to me, the first thing I'm like, oh crap, is there a way we can get this to $100 or less, or even, somewhere in 80, that's our sweet spot is somewhere less than $80. But it's so hard with the rising prices and the cost of things to make these, especially since we're dealing with such low numbers, like it's not like we're Lego making 10,000 parts or whatever. And so cost of parts is a lot harder. But anyway, I diverge. The biggest thing is these things, doing for me personally, like you'll even see it with this next release coming up based on a certain show that's going on right now. There's going to be different options for people. And I think that allows more customers to enjoy this. And it's not a cash grab. There's not, I'm not doing this for making money. If I was, I would be really struggling. My kids would hate me. So luckily that's not, I'm not making, this is not a bread and butter thing for me. It's a passion side that I do as a hobby, that just
as it is for most
business.
brand operators, and a lot of folks don't recognize that. They don't realize that Rex has a full-time job, and
Right.
Chris LCM has a full-time job. And
I was going to say the same thing earlier as well. A lot of people don't appreciate that it is a side hustle necessarily, or a hobby even for a lot, and everyone is just a human being, just trying to enjoy themselves and have fun.
they're just trying to sell enough to afford to make the next one.
And that's
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is a tricky dance, is the fact that you have, for me, a long time ago, I don't even remember what year it was, I had to make a decision because I always had the principle, I wanted to make the best figures at the best price at the best quality, right? And I always wanted to make it available to as many people as possible. One of the things that was really disappointing, I was a huge Christo fan, was when they started limiting it and then having figures over $100 at the time, which was it was such a big difference maker that all of a sudden I was like, I have to pay $100 for these? Oh my God. And I started thinking, you know what? I need to make figures that people can afford, that are easier. And then obviously now with the competition and the fact that we have so many good brands making custom parts with theirs and lots of them, if you don't offer the elite figure, people might not grab onto your brand anymore. So I'm kind of in this middle ground where you have to appease a group that can't afford it, but you want to get the collectors that want everything in that figure, or else it's not good enough, And then there's also the fact that I think when they look at figures, they want to have a certain what's the way
aesthetic?
I want to put this? Yeah. Well, either way, the point I'm trying to make is that you when you have these when figures went over $100, that was a big deal, And so I think it's better to offer options for people, when they're getting into this. I want them to love. This is Phil, I know you got into this for the love of it, to, maybe because it's a fun hobby, Brett, I know you got into it for, I think in your last podcast, you're talking about that it's a little bit of escapism. You can kind of get into this world of collecting and photography. We all have we have different ways of coming into this, and it's an enjoyable thing outside of, our regular, day-to-day job and life. But some people, there's another group that looks at this as a way to earn money, that this is ever since, I think it was 3 years ago, an article, or 2 years ago, maybe, that this article came out about that Lego was one of the best investments you could do. And all of a sudden I saw tons of people getting into Lego and buying them, but not because they wanted to get it out and build it with their kids, because they wanted to put it in a shelf, shrink wrapped, and sell in about 4 years. Or in the case of customs, they'll only buy a figure if there was less than 100, because then the resale value is better. And that's not the way I've ever approached this customs.
Some are so bold, they don't care about the quantity made. They just know the brand attached to it. And it's funny you bring this up, because we've had this conversation in our group chat many times. And it was not only the combination of that article, which I remember reading as well, but then when COVID hit and everyone was on lockdown, a lot of folks had a hit in their income and were looking for a way to, pay bills fast. And then on top of that, I remember Citizen Brick did their President Zelensky fig, and that got worldwide attention. And the next thing you know, what we were buying for $100 as a way of raising funds was being flipped for like over $1,000.
Yes,
the same day. And then at the same time, there was a scandal that broke out with the Star Wars Lego folks about, I guess, Phil, you might have give me a better backstory on this.
Boba Fett fig, I think it was something. That was one of the big ones, wasn't it? That went up in price massively.
Well, they were like, apparently there was I don't know if this is all true or not, but allegedly big time YouTubers were
inflating the prices.
The prices by saying this is going to be worth a lot one day. And then that was after they buy up all the stock to artificially inflate that value and then sell them off. So all this stuff was happening literally within the same year. And now and we're getting way off subject here, but now this is a personal thing with me. I've talked about this a lot. Now some of the Star Wars designers that usually just design are crossing over with custom brand makers and getting their stuff produced. Well, a lot of that mentality has led over into the custom market. So, and then Christo started pushing more Star Wars stuff. So then they started grabbing the Christo stuff. So now you're seeing Christo figs that probably would have sold for $200 in secondhand are now going for like $700, $800, $900. A buddy of mine sold an LCM Baggles Vader for $350, and he was told he was crazy. He could have gone to the Discord and sold it for $700. It's just insane.
And it's getting like that the second they drop as well. As soon as these figs are being delivered to people, they're already that crazy price. It is just nuts, isn't it?
Second it goes live on Citizen Brick's website, they're on eBay. They haven't even been shipped out yet. And they're still available on the Citizen Brick website.
Yeah, I love seeing that. $150 and you can get it for $25 right now on the site.
and you look at these eBay sellers, and a lot of them you can tell they're not custom collectors. They're just, those entrepreneurs looking for the next Storage Wars, easy quick fix, to get that money.
So that's kind of what you're looking at, is a lot of those people coming into this, seeing those articles that you can make money on Lego, but losing sight that this is actually a hobby for a lot of people, that they try to enjoy it. They try to get these figures. And I also want to just say too, the people that do make them for, 100 figures or less or whatever, and a lot of times that's their production capacity or, whatever. So I don't want to slate that ever, if that's what they work at. But the people that put it down at low levels just to, get a certain value in the aftermarket for, I don't see any collectors or sellers that do that anymore. But for a time period there was, and I was really disappointed to see that, because I know a lot of people, we were talking, one of your last episode was on FOMO, that was happening big time with whenever that would happen, that these little secret drops would happen, and half of them or all of them would be gone by the time it opens. And if you weren't there in the first 3 minutes, it'd be gone. And I always felt, and I was one of them that happened all the time, as a collector, I'd get on there and go, dang it, I got to use my network to see if I can find one now and scrounge one.
Well, it's funny you bring that up, those instances, because we talked about Squirrel Girl earlier. That was an instance of a fig that was sold out before it even was made public.
Yeah, and I had something similar happen with one of my collabs as well, and we talked about it right away, and I was like,
I'm about to go into that right now.
Yeah, I'll segue for it.
Let's talk about Agatha.
Yes.
You're not getting out of this one. No.
So pre-orders have always been, a source of contention, and it's actually been it's going to be a subject of a future episode. But when your collab Agatha Harkness, with Diamond came out, it was a bit of a mess because a lot of the connected collectors, guilty parties in this room,
Yeah.
we bought out stock before the public release, and it actually resulted in an unprecedented act of doing a reprint of what was once considered a limited number fig. And this was rectified, if I recall. Diamond did another run with just a non-numbered carded fig.
Yes.
But other than that, it was identical.
Yes.
And I feel that, how should I put this? There was a lot of the sky is falling talk when this happened. The idea that we reprint a limited fig, because there are collectors that collect for this being a hobby and escapism. There are those that collect not to flip it, but just to know they own something of value. And they're
Right.
worried about that limited edition. Because let's be honest, the cards are just cards. If the figs are all the same, you would never know what number 1 is, what number 200 is.
Exactly. Yep.
So that's why I was making the argument for a while. Perhaps Agatha could have been re-released with just one magic effect or no magic effects or something, or just one facial expression to kind of, but at the same time, you and I had a conversation about it. I understood where you're coming from. You want to get your product in front of as many people as possible to enjoy it, and just for the love of the game, right?
Yeah, and I think to kind of go on like the thinking process that I learned from with that one was to know the plans of the person that you're working with and how it's going to be released. As I don't think DCB number one anticipated, and DCB is Diamond Custom Bricks for the newbies out there. They were, they had a certain expectation too that was actually trumped by the demand, and they had no idea that it was going to be that big when it came out. And I don't think I did either. At the same time, we both had different ideas of what the total numbers were, and I don't think that we were on the same page for that. But we did right away see eye to eye that there was a mistake made that way, and also the way it was released was not. I believe, wasn't there something, I want to say, and this is me finding out secondhand because I had no idea, was that a lot of them were sold even, like you said, wasn't it before they even went on the website?
Yeah, that's something that happens. I mean, in any hobby, any collectible hobby, you have your different tiers, if you should call it.
Yes.
You got your new folks that are just trying to figure out, where the heck do I get these things? You have folks that go directly to just through websites and are quickly hitting refresh on their keyboard, hoping to land one. You have the folks that work out their special arrangements with resellers that they've worked with for years.
Yep.
You've got some folks that can go straight to the brand and say, hook me up. There's an argument to be had saying that's unfair, because everyone should have a fair shot at getting an item. If you have the money, you should be able to spend it as you wish. But there's also the argument to say, well, understand that these people have been collecting for years or been loyal customers for years, and some of these resellers or brands wouldn't be around if it wasn't for the support of this cadre of longtime collectors, and they want to feel obligated to help, pay that back in kind.
Definitely.
My problem is, like with Squirrel Girl, which again also a Diamond Custom Fig. Boys, they can't get a break. With Squirrel Girl, that was kind of revealed on the back channels, and that's when it got scooped up. With Agatha, the problem is that was announced publicly and then got scooped up privately. That's what I do not endorse at all. If you put it out there publicly, you should probably coordinate with your reseller saying, hey, get this on the DL, or please don't take orders yet. This is when it's going to go live.
Yep.
But you can't always prevent that. But if there's going to be some sort of like exclusive hidden, this happens not in just superheroes. This happens with Citizen Brick and others. There's always these exclusive, or there's like the Taiwanese Expo figs that come out that you can only
do
get.
They still do that, by the way? I was wondering about that. Yeah.
The last one was canceled because of COVID.
Oh yeah.
And actually, the figure that was going to be for that one was again Diamond Custom Bricks. It was their Jessica Drew Spider-Woman.
Oh, okay.
And so I had gotten a copy through the ways that I get things, and eventually they decided, okay, the conference isn't going to happen, COVID, whatever, and then they made a public release of it, so everyone can get one, which I thought was the best way to go.
And I think with you, and I appreciate all those different, I understand too, talking with resellers that have, they build a community of supporters that trust that they have, exclusive access to get all these things first, and they deserve that, and I completely understand. I think the problem with the Agatha thing, I think, comes with the disconnect between, my approach to has always been, to make as many figs as demand dictates. And I found a difference. I don't know if you guys were collecting them, but back when I did, the Batman and the first Captain America I did, I would do a run and then they'd sell out. And then people were like, oh, I still want. And so I just put another run out there. I was like, hey, let's keep going until people are happy, and that was normal. That was okay. And then all of a sudden, a year or two later, then that wasn't okay anymore. Like they're like, hey, I thought this was limited and blah, blah. And so then I had to have a discussion with my resellers and come to terms of like, how do I make collectors happy while at the same time keeping my business approach to making figures kind of a happy marriage. So where, things are limited to a certain range, but at the same time meeting as much demand as possible. And that's where, having an open period of pre-sales for a certain determined time, and whoever wants to buy it can. And at that point, that's the limit. Nobody else can get it after that point. And it's worked out pretty well. And so the nice thing is if someone decides when they see it, you got 2 weeks or so to look at it and decide whether you want it or not. And if you don't, then you can move on. And if you didn't, and you decide later, you can try to get it in the secondhand market, but at least you had that opportunity, And that's just
I think it does meet in the middle. I think it does make it fair.
Yeah, and it's so and to be honest, all the different numbers that come in are unique to that product, and so it's limited. You're not going to get any more. It's not going to be reprinted. It's never going to be made again. If it is, it's going to be completely redesigned from head to foot. And so I think that way collectors can be happy with that, knowing, that this is going to be limited that way. They'll never have that product made again. And so that's been my happy medium that I found, that I can still meet as much demand as I can, while at the same time, making collectors know that is limited that way.
That is the biggest upside to pre-orders, though. Everyone seems to be down on pre-orders these days. It's becoming more and more common. But I mean, that is great, isn't it? That makes it, like you said, it makes everyone happy at the end of the day, really, doesn't it? When you think about it, from a perspective of demand.
Right.
Everybody likes the system until the system doesn't work for them.
Doesn't work. Yeah.
Right.
Adam, so like certain figures become like benchmarks in the pricing scheme of the secondhand market. And for some reason, it's always your figs. So
oh God.
Your Endgame Thor became the first like real $400 aftermarket fig.
I would say Christo still has me pretty knocked down. I think his figure's still.
Christo's a bit of an exception, though. He's not in the community in the same way, I'd say.
Yeah, I suppose in that way, yes.
True. And then the next benchmark fig was your Ragnarok Thor.
Oh, so, yeah. Is that? See, I don't know the secondhand market that well. I'm always like, I remember I was.
I know a Ragnarok Thor that went for $600.
Oh, wow. Are you serious?
Yep.
Oh, my God.
I would say now,
Adam, you never miss a PCB fig.
I say now you're probably floating at about $350 for it.
Okay.
The demand's gone down, and then Brothers came out with their version, which then, of course, saturates the market a little bit. But
it's crazy. It's so funny. That's such a foreign thing to me, the secondhand market and what is fair price and all that. Because I remember just a month or two ago, I had a friend of mine, a really close friend, that I would always give one of my figures to him that I made, because he was also one that kind of supported me in the beginning to say, hey, you can do this, go and try this thing and see if it works. So just to thank him, I would always give him a figure. And his kids got out of Lego age and he doesn't really look at them. So he's like, you know what, I might as well, sell these, see if I can get some, maybe get a trip out of it or something, maybe. I don't think he understood how much each one of these was. I didn't either. So I remember asking, I think it was Mini Legogo, just to help me sell these and just say, hey, they're all taken well care of. They're all in their cases, blah, blah, blah. You figure out the prices. I don't know how much these go for.
Oh, yeah, Mini's great. He sold a few figs for me as well.
Yeah, and so is Rex. They do good jobs selling those on their secondhand market. So I just was like, I'd go to Mini Legogo because he wasn't as busy at the time. I think he just kind of started. I hadn't really known him at that point as much. But so he did that, and he came back with the prices like, oh my God, some of these are that much. And I remember telling my friend what these sold for, and he's like, man, you got me more than one trip. That's incredible. Like, these are worth that much. I was like, I didn't have a clue.
So, all right. Well, speaking of inflated prices and whatnot, Star Wars has really taken a solid hold within the custom fig community. And you yourself have tackled Star Wars back when you started, and mostly recently with your Mandalorian line.
Mhm.
Do you feel this is going to grow into a new permanent branch of figs to explore, or are you simply just focusing on the characters that appeal to you?
It's always, are you talking about for me personally or the market in
Yeah,
general? Yeah,
for
for me,
you. For
for me
you.
personally, I'm an 80s kid. I grew up with OT to the bone, baby. Um, so the original trilogy and the Star Wars, that branch was all that theme was always very like true to my heart from the 80s. Like that's something I grew up loving. I grew up getting all the minifigure or not minifigures, action figures growing up. And then I remember the funny thing is what got me back in the hobby again. I remember going through a Target, as this happens with every dad, I'm sure now. I was going through Target and I kind of peered down the Lego aisle and I saw there was a Darth Vader minifigure. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? They have a Darth Vader Lego figure. So I scooted my way down there. And I remember my wife coming to get me like, come on, we got to go. You're in a toy aisle. I was like, I know. Just give me a minute. And so I'd look at this thing going like, this is amazing. Star Wars and Lego, two things I loved as a kid together. And so that got me back into kind of interested in Lego again and kind of bringing my daughter down that aisle to see if she liked Lego. And sure enough, she did. And then next thing you know, we're building things together again as a 29-year-old, and me being back and, getting out of the dark ages, as we call it now in the community. That's what got me back. And so, yeah, I've always had that connection to that theme. And I still collect the Lego sets that are appealing, like especially, I just got the Mando, the fighter one that he has in the latest 2 seasons. I know some people that are Star Wars fans like, you don't know the name of it? It's a Naboo
the
starfighter.
Naboo fighter,
Yeah.
is it?
Exactly.
Starfighter? Yeah.
And I got that late last year, and so I mean I still get those. And so in terms of custom minifigures, it's always appealed to me. But for me, I'm not really, I appreciate the prequels, but I'm not really a prequels guy myself, except for maybe Revenge of the Sith, that grabbed me in certain ways because of the transition into the original trilogy. So there are a few characters from there that appeal to me. But yeah, it's always for me, I have to be engaged enough to want to go to that vector program and start from scratch and create something for the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks to 3 months, spending a lot of time day in and day out, looking at that design. And if it's not something that truly appeals to me too, not just to customers, then it's a waste of my time. So everything that you see that I make, I'm 100%, involved and engaged in. So it's got to be something I love. Otherwise, in terms of a designer in me, it's just it's like going, it's like slave labor. I just wouldn't
It'll
love it.
show in the design if you don't love it.
Exactly. And I won't put my heart and soul into it like I would almost all the designs I've done, So I've had that happen before where, I'll make a compromise on a figure, maybe with a collab, and I'll say, yeah, let's try that. I'm kind of interested, and I'll get into it, and I'll feel so bad because after a week and a half, I'll just be like, I just can't get this. This isn't feeling like this isn't my vibe, So maybe pass it on to someone else and see, good luck with it. But I have to be engaged, and for the most part, Star Wars does that for me. So it's something that I can engage in, and it's something I look forward to doing, day in and day out. If it's especially these, I'm a huge Mando fan, if you haven't guessed. Love that series. So most of those things have appealed to me in some way or another. So yeah, it's I think for me personally, you'll see bits and pieces of quite a bit this year, especially. Going forward, who knows what in terms of percentage of what comes out or not. I think it's just what's engaging me at the time, and if it's concurrent with the wants of collectors like you guys are into,
Oh no, I already made it clear. I can't
that's
afford that rabbit hole.
I forgot.
can't.
That's right. You've made the decision.
Although,
Star Wars is not
although
your boss,
I might.
right?
I'll be honest with you. I might, because I do enjoy the Mando show. I might grab your V2 for sure.
Yeah.
Since it goes back to the whole FOMO brand loyalty thing.
I went down that rabbit hole. It's Adam's fault because of his Mando fig.
Yeah, you can put the blame on me. I'm sorry. It is. Yeah. But I completely understand, because I mean when you're talking about FOMO the last episode, I was thinking too. I mean, I missed out. I actually, I usually can find my way into the system if I miss one the day it's dropped or something. But there's several Star Wars ones I missed last year that were really good, like Bagels / LCM Legend CMOC version of Ahsoka from like the Rebels series, which I wasn't really into Rebels, but the way the figure turned out was just beautiful. And I was like, oh damn, I missed that one. So I had that, definitely for that figure. But I think the nice thing is there's now appears, at least 3 brands, me, Bagels / LCM, and Jaka that are all kind of interested in that realm.
Top Mountain did a Vader as well.
Oh yeah, of course. And yeah.
And
And there's
as well, didn't they?
And I want to say Lifebrick has teased something in the past. I can't remember.
And the nice thing is too, there's even, there's even like those people that like the old school look of like the Star Wars figures, like the ones that are from like the 90s and stuff. Yeah.
Oh, like the SJ Bricks and that sort of thing, is it as well? They're doing sort of classic looking figs.
Yeah, and I've seen those pop up here and there.
Yeah.
And there's even for people that are fans of that, there's a nice variety at least. I always think that that's a good thing, because then someone's might have something on a figure that they're not quite in, and all of a sudden this other brand doesn't, and they're like, that's what I was talking about. So I think variety is the spice of life. So whenever there's people always go, oh, did you see they're releasing it, I guess you're screwed. I was like, I am. Why am I? That's not how that works. We all have different approaches. We all have different likes and dislikes when it comes to figure parts and things that we do. So I think that's a good thing. Do I sell as much as someone else, or vice versa? Maybe not, but at the very least we can translate, what we see as being a good figure out to the public, and they can kind of decide through, it gives them variety of something to look into. And sometimes I've even noticed, even myself being guilty of this, is that, you'll see it in the beginning as one thing, and then it goes out to the community and people take pictures, and then it just grows on, and then you're like, you know what, I gotta have that. And that happens a lot. So, I mean, it's good to have variety out there so that, maybe up front it wasn't what you were wanting, but later on, yeah, maybe it was. So
that reminds me of what Phil said last episode. He blamed Marcus and I for inducing FOMO with our photos.
Yeah, it's true. You guys
blame a lot of people for things on these podcasts. It's everyone else's fault. I'm a victim.
Yeah. Well, you can just transfer your guilt, Phil, right, to these guys, right? That way you feel a little better.
I transfer my money to you. I may as well do that directly. I transfer my guilt to them, so why not?
Exactly.
So it's funny you bring that up, because about you missing out on one, because I was surprised to learn through our talks that I would have hoped that as a high-profile brand creator, you would have some sort of red line where you can just call up Lifebrick and say, "Hey, can I get one of those?" But no, you're just another customer.
I'm writing this down right on a pad of paper right now, because I keep forgetting. You gave me this idea. What was it, like a year ago?
You need a brand Illuminati.
I know. I need to have like why wouldn't I use this? Like, I've talked to Lifebricks, I've talked to these guys. Why wouldn't we do that? That's something. And I will say at this point, I do have with another brand that we kind of have like a trade system that we're like, oh, you like that one? I'll make this one. So I just think I need to make that bigger, so that way, we don't miss out on those things.
And I get
why
that you
wouldn't I
guys
use that, right?
Yeah, and then there's always this talk about, why don't you guys coordinate, your releases? Because I think was it the John Walker set that you and Jaka came out with in like the same 12 hours?
Right.
But
something like that.
I DM'd you. I'm like, did you guys plan this, or you're like, I don't know what the hell's going on.
Similarly now with the Mando as well.
Oh God, yeah, I know. It's one of those things. The funny thing is, these things take months to put together. So the funny thing is, timing is always one of those weird things that when it does happen like that, you're just like, well, how about that? Isn't that funny? And I collab with these guys a lot of times. We won't know it, and we're like, "Oh, dude, I didn't know that was happening," because we don't talk about our other releases.
That's why you guys should have some sort of group chat or something where you can rib each other, saying, "Hey, it's me versus you. Let's do it." And just have some fun.
If we knew that, then we would be like, for me, that would be crippling, because if I knew that, like for example, what was one of them? For example, I did that 2016 followers contest, and one of the ones that was on that was Daredevil, right? And then literally like a month later, Lifebricks, who I love as a collector, they and they're such a great design brand and stuff. When they made theirs, I was like, I really have to take my time with this, because they did such a great job with it. So I'm not in any rush to make mine. So I want to make sure it's great. So be on that same kind of.
I was going to say that throughout our relationship, through casual talk or pictures, you've shared designs or plans for future figs that have been on the back burner for some time. What would cause a design to be pushed further back in the queue? And in general, how many figs would you say fit in this category?
Ooh, good question. Well, here's the thing is, I'm kind of a nitpicker. For some people, not nitpicky enough, but I believe I'm pretty nitpicky about certain things. The way I've always approached it, and whenever someone asks me, if I'm going to go into design, like what should I do? What's the thing? I always say, well, don't be quick about your design. Don't just get it done, and then when it's done, say, I'm ready to go. You got to let something sit. And so for me, if I let it sit, usually a week or two, I'll see some things to change. And so the problem is if I keep letting it sit, sometimes I'll see so many things that I keep changing it, and then it's not as good as it was first time, sometimes or the second time. So that can be some of the issues. Sometimes it has to do with that, there's only so many custom part designers that are, in the realm that we work in. And so like the one I work with, and then there's also luckily enough one that is at the production facility I work with, and so I can kind of bounce it off, and have two different designers that I work with on that. But then the collaborators that I work with, they have their designers, and so it all kind of depends on how quickly they can get the design to a point where I'm happy with it too, where it looks the way I want it to look. And some things, literally, they can go design it, comes back, and it's way better than I ever imagined, then we're good. But sometimes there's little things that's just something about the look of it has to look a certain way in order to be the way I want it. And so it's just a lot of back and forth. And if it was, a guy that was literally like in my, city and we saw each other every day, that'd be one thing. But this is people that, I have a designer that works in Europe. I have a designer that works in Asia, and some of the collaborators I work with work down in Australia. So it's kind of, you don't, and they have their own jobs on top of it. This is another side gig kind of thing. So to get something done quickly, it's not like they work on this every hour of the day, every day. They work on it on the weekends. Some of them work on it only at nights when they get home from work. So it just depends. And so when something, and like I said, imagine a conveyor belt, things keep moving. And if something's close to done, then I can post it and put it out there for pre-order. Or sometimes I have to wait for, cost estimate has to be adjusted for certain things. And it's a whole bunch of things, but mostly it's me being a nitpicker, making sure something's as good as I want it to be released. So
Does that ever backfire on you though? Because you said you're a perfectionist. So do you ever reach a point where you think, right, that's enough nitpicking now? Or perhaps do you sort of push that design out to other people to get feedback on if you're not 100% sure or anything like that?
So I want to say let's just say I have some people that that I know have kind of a good design view of things when it comes to minifigures, and they can see if there's something that needs working. And I always, even at the first iteration, I'll kind of bounce things back and forth with them and see what they think. And that's always you should have people giving you feedback. If you don't, you're just going to be releasing something that might not be as good as it could be. So you should always do feedback and be open to people saying some, stuff that might sound harsh, but it's good feedback to get that thing to the next level or to get it better. So I've gotten to a point once where I got stuck and I just couldn't find that look I was looking for, and I just moved on, and then it's actually a good thing, because then when I, got either better at designing or got to a different aspect of design that worked better for that figure, then I reapproached it and I was like, oh, and then I could release it. And that happened.
Is that what happened with Infinity War Cap? Because that had been on the docket forever. Mara, so excited because I know she was asking for like years.
So there's a couple of them. That was one, and I'm actually glad. So the things, they kind of work out nicely that way. You think it's kind of like, well, we lost that one, but it actually works out pretty nicely. So for example, the Avengers cap had been in the pipeline for a long time, and the helmet just never looked right because there's a certain, it's not like the other cap hats. It has like a different look to it, right? And I just was never happy with those things on the side of his ear, how they had to look. And then on top of it, just how it sits on the head and mixes with the head underneath. It had to look a certain way. And I actually dropped that one for a while and then went back to it with, originally it was with my production design, do the design of that one. And then I went back to my own designer and had him tweak things of it. And it was just a nice marriage that way, because then we took the best of what worked with that designer's and some of his ideas, and then the thoughts I had on it, and it finally came around. And then I think personally, my own design style improved enough to make it look better too, that I was happier with it, so that I could release it in a way that I thought looked the way that I wanted it to at some point. So I think it does work out nicely sometimes, but there's other times, like for example, the PlayStation 4 Spider-Man, which everybody wanted, and I even wanted, because I actually watched, what was it, like 20 something hours of somebody playing that game from each stage. And so I was like, oh, I gotta make that figure. And I could never get it to look the right way. Still to this day, I'm not happy with it. I look at that thing and people are always like, why didn't you make one? And I wanted to, but I'm such a nitpicker. I never got to a point where I thought it was either, different enough and cool enough and what I wanted to look like versus other brands that have released it. Even Lego had a really good one. So it kind of can be a trap, but if I have enough people bouncing ideas and working with enough creative people, that sometimes you can luckily get to a point where I am like, that's how I wanted it to look. The biggest story I have on that one is Batman. It was the Dark Knight one. It is one of my favorite movies of all time is The Dark Knight. And I wanted to make that Batman. And I remember when I first started designing, that's the first thing I went to, was trying to design that thing. And that took forever. And then when I went to try to make a custom part, that also took so I just kept dropping it and getting it back up and dropping it. And it took 2.5 years to get to a point where I was happy with it to get it to pre-order. So that's a long time of going back and forth. Other than the PS4 Spider-Man, those are probably the two longest in queue. Just design it's a tough thing to get the look that you're looking for and have it match kind of the in real life look of things. It's just a tough marriage to get to that point.
So basically, your queue is purely self-motivated. It's not really influenced by any other brands. So that because you've tackled almost every MCU, Sony versus Spider-Man outfit so far, but there's still a few gaps like Garfield's homemade suit.
Oh yeah,
and Jin just announced his coming out.
Oh so yeah, and I was joking with him. I was like, you know what, you dirty dog, you got me before I could get there. And I was and the nice thing is though, he actually has a different approach to mine, which is great. So that way so like I said, different minds bring that spice that people like, different approaches. So that way when I get to it, I'm kind of in Mando mode right now and some other things. So the nice thing is he'll be able to get his sold and have nice purchases and all that. And then when I get to mine eventually, people that are more interested in my style and approach might like that. So it'll be nice to kind of have those
people like me that's just going to buy both.
Buy both, right? Exactly. Yeah. So I never am rushed ever by another brand doing something. I actually, like I said, I love that sometimes I look at them and I was like, oh man, you set the bar high, dang it. But at the same time, I also just love their different approaches. Like, Jin has an approach that, he has so many unique creative ideas for approaching something. So for example, his lizard is going to be completely different than the one I have designed, which is going to be nice. It's not so much the homemade spider, it's just his regular everyday look. And he's got his backpack and skateboard and things. So it's nice to have different approaches that way. That way I always just want to do it in my, I have my approach. Sometimes they kind of overlap. I remember I was just about done designing my Iron Spidey and was thinking, this is going to be ready to go in about 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden I saw he dropped his sneak peek of his. And we both had very similar ideas. We both had those gauntlets pieces and we both kind of had, similar ideas in terms of some of the design, but his was a little bit different. So I was like, I think we might be releasing this at the same time. Let's do it so that we both can benefit. Why don't you release yours first? I can finish this other one I'm currently working on, and then I'll just release mine maybe a month or two later. And it worked out beautifully that way. He could get his sold and there was no conflict that way. I think it works better if you just, if I knew that with all the different brands, we could always work it out. So that way one person sells theirs and then I can sell mine at a different time. And I try to do that if I see it early enough. For example, Jaka just sold their version of Mando, which was great because then they came out early enough that I can still have enough time to get to mine and have it separated enough. And I don't worry, a lot of people are like, first come is always, they get the best, but I don't worry about it. It's not like that. I'm glad that we could have it separated enough so it's not competing at the same time. That's always.
No, I find that collectors fall into several tiers. One is the one that just says, I'm going to get every version of that character because I love the character.
Uh-huh.
There's going to be the ones that know that, well, I know Adam's probably going to make that eventually, so I'll just wait for his because they like that aesthetic. I really don't see how brand releases courting the same character tend to cannibalize the sales of another, unless you're an inexperienced collector that doesn't understand the styles of, because, like say Life Bricks, they've really leaned heavily into accessories lately.
Yeah, and I think the only problem with that though is, I think just recently, I would say this is a more recent trend than it was maybe back in the Flickr days when I was there. But there's always, and maybe I'm wrong, but there was always, like, I guess even as a collector, I do have that, but I think it's more present now, is they want something, the minute they see it, they just can't hold off. They got to get it. There's not as much patience.
That was the whole second episode of this podcast, man.
It's the FOMO again, because you don't know which one's going to be the best, and because they're not all dropping at the same time,
Right.
Sometimes you've got a month apart. You're like, well, I got to get this one now in case it's the best one.
Right. And I even
can't-
did that too. I mean, I did that with, I think you guys talked about it last episode with, oh God, the Daredevil that came out from the She-Hulk series. And I ended up buying 2 of them because, I was just like, oh, this one looks great. And then I saw another one, I was like, oh, that one looks good too. I wonder which one's going to be better. So I just bought them both, but I can trade for all mine, like a lot of times I can, like I said, I have some brands I know, and I can just work with that and just trade with them. So that makes it easier for me. But if you can't, then you have to just buy it outright. That's hard to do, to budget for all that. So I do feel for those customers that have to budget and make those decisions without seeing both products at the same time. So that would be frustrating. But then I think most people know what my style looks like and what that other brand style looks like. If they can kind of have that general idea, they'll know, what is it worth waiting for mine to come out or not. I think most people have an idea of what I'm going to do. And if you're a new collector, you kind of, you're trying to say what kind of things to give as suggestions for people. For me as a collector, I've found, like for you, you can just buy both of them. Or if you have a rule, you'll say, I'm not going to get Star Wars, or I'm only going to get these brands. So those are good things too. But another way to do it too is just to say, maybe as a starting collector, see which brands you like better. Try this brand for a figure that is appealing to you, and then try this other brand for another figure that appeals to you. Or if you like one particular figure, buy both of them at the beginning just to try, and then see which one you like better. And maybe you'll see which brand is more your kind of, like you were saying, some people are like Life Bricks has a nice collection of custom parts, and maybe that's more your angle. Maybe you like the style that it fits into, like I try to integrate mine so it kind of fits into a Lego aesthetic, and it can just sit on the shelf with the Lego and kind of mix in. Although, I try to bring it to a certain level that's like almost the style is the same, but there's some
we've
elements.
nicknamed that "If Lego Gave a Shit." This is what it look like.
Oh my God. Yeah. So, I mean, at least then that way they have a feel for, okay, this is what I'm going for. And I like that. I'm going to go with that. Like, I just remember talking to Sket a month or 2 back, like he put together this one fig barf. And I was like, really? You like that? That's the one you like together with this and that? And he was like, yeah, this looks better. And this is why. And I was like, well, it's just
getting ahead of my questions, man.
Yeah, sorry. And so I can see we had different approaches to what looks good for certain things. So I mean, that's the thing, is you got to feel what is the thing that what appeals to you in terms of collecting. And when you have that idea, buy from these different brands, see if that's what you're into. Sometimes you don't tell until a figure's in your hand. Pictures sometimes don't do it justice, a lot of times because of lighting, or a lot of times because of just angles of things. And then when you get it in your hand, you're like, oh, dang, that is pretty cool. So I think that might be my suggestion, is try things, see what works either for your budget / what you're interested in. And then, like you said, come up with kind of an approach and then stick with that and see how it works. And maybe after a year or so, you're like, I would tweak that approach and do this instead. Maybe just stick with the brand, or maybe you're just going to go with the one that has a certain approach in terms of which one has the most specific accessory that you wanted to come with it, or something. But it is difficult, but I think over time you develop what works and what doesn't, I think, as a collector.
So going back to styles and aesthetic, this is something that Phil and I really wanted to talk to you about. And we are in an age of unprecedented innovation in the custom minifigure world. Back in the day, like UV reactive printing was the premium feature, and now we have more accessories. We have printed hands, the introduction of magnets and intricate molding. And as a brand that closely aligns to the traditional Lego aesthetic, how do you draw the line when considering new and innovative solutions to design problems?
It's been an interesting dance over the years. I think it's been one of the, so I remember everything changes. I always say that I'm going to stick to this.
Let me caveat that real quick. For example, your recent Iron Man 3 Tony, you had printed the headgear as opposed to a mold. which is something that Minifigure Factory and what most recently Earthly Bricks had done.
Yeah. And I think it's in that one, it's more just my own taste, but I think here's the thing is when it comes to design choices, I think the thing is for me, it's changed over, like my appetite has changed. And I think it's been pushed a little bit by what I've seen other brands do and what works. And it's also to do with the fact that, when Lego first did, and they still to this day, they don't print on the back legs. And I never did either. I thought that was just something Lego wouldn't do. And so I wouldn't. And the reason for that was, and I think Lego's reasoning too was that's just going to rub off the print every time you sit it in a chair, every time that you want to put that into a stud somehow and hang it, it's going to scratch on the back of the legs. So why would you do that? But the ink that's used for printing has gotten much more sturdy for pad printing. Whereas when I first started, if that thing was sat down on a chair like 20 times, print would be half off probably because you scratched the crap out of it. And I used to be so nervous about shipping things out. I'd wrap the crap out of it in bubble wrap all the time. But printing has gotten much more solid now. You can sit things in the grooves and it won't scratch for the most part. I'm not going to say 100%, but I know there's still collectors going like, "Are you serious? You'd put put that on a seat?" But I'm just saying in general, the printing is better, so I trust it more, and so that finally got me to a point where I could accept putting printing on the back. Another thing is too that more dual molded legs started coming out too, so that you could kind of do that. You can get away with it a little bit by just putting, boot printing on the bottom of the foot, whereas it wouldn't go anywhere near that and scratch it as much. But I've kind of, now that we can see how durable the printing is, I've changed that approach. There's only one thing I have not, like, for example, I've gotten more wraparound arm printing because I can feel that we can do that now, whereas before it was really sloppy. And so it's, in terms of aesthetics, it does look better. And it does push Lego. I think Lego has done more arm printing in the last 2 years than they probably have ever in the last 5 years, just because printing technology has gotten better where you can cover more of the arm and it's better quality. And I think pushing the boundaries by these other companies has kind of pushed me to think about what is aesthetically still Lego. And I've kind of thought too to myself, what parts, if I could, tell Lego, what could they do to improve it? Those are things that I would kind of include in my figures. So for example, aesthetically, it's nice to have wraparound leg printing. It's nice to have wraparound arm printing if you can do it. The only thing I just still cannot, I don't think is an aesthetically astute thing for me. It's not a choice that I agree with, is printing on the side of torsos for two reasons. My approach to that is, first of all, female torsos look really weird with wraparound printing, in my opinion, because they have those hips that are drawn on the front, and then seeing it continue on the side just looks like there's some cancer on the side of her. It doesn't look right to me. So
like you can't show that negative space on the side, can you? It's
no,
not without carving it out like an area like custom.
Right. And that would be, for me, the only way to make that look right is if you had some sort, and then you didn't have to draw that in. But the fact that you have to draw it in, and that's the aesthetic that Lego has to this day still, and it looks right, I can't do that for that reason. So that's one reason. The second reason is, even with the durability of Legos, one thing, if you ever look at it, is the side of an arm scratches the side of torsos ridiculously. So people like to pose it for photographs and stuff still, and it's going to scratch. And I can't tell you how many times, like when I made a photograph of one of the brands that would do that, where I noticed that, oh, you know what, there's a little bit of a ring there I can see, and I don't want to ruin the print there, so I'm just going to keep the arms to the side. For that reason too, I'm not quite there. I don't think that's
there was
worthy
an
of changing
instance
that.
a year or two ago with a minifigure that was packed tight and had, arm braces of sorts, and because it's such, it was packed so tight, once you try to move the arm, it took the print right off.
Yeah. And I think that collectors, the first thing you want to do is kind of pose it and check out, all the looks. So if someone prints on the side, what are you going to do? You're going to move that arm to see that print. And when you do that, there's a chance you could scrape that side printing
That's
with
what
the
Photoshop
arm.
is for.
Exactly.
So you also had mentioned to me once before in our talks about you like to consider how we display these things. So like capes and tails and that kind of, and like your challenges with Captain America Sam Wilson with the wings, trying to accommodate those who want to display these things within cases and such.
Yeah, yeah, and that's I keep in mind three things because I have a lot of friends like you and a couple other guys that do photography. I always keep that in mind. Like if this was posed, what would really allow that to be posed well for photography? So one of the things that, and it happens still where I will put this idea out there, and the designer still doesn't do that with the cape, but where I think a cape should flow back enough so that you can pose a leg back some way, so it looks like he's walking, or maybe for Superman have it where he's flying with his legs back. If the cape is, dead against the back of the leg, you can't do that. So I usually try to have it where it's swooping back a little bit, at least so you can pose more. I know a lot of photography friends appreciate that more when it comes to these molded capes. And I know that the tough thing with that though is that I see feedback from certain people is, some people like the aesthetics of the cloth cape for photographs because you can pose it more. And so then when you make something, for example, a Thor hair that hangs over the top of that, that Thor hair will only match with that plastic cape. And so if you remove the plastic cape, then it doesn't have that same aesthetic. It almost looks like it's floating, you know what I mean? Which sometimes you can get away with and make something look like maybe the wind's blowing or something. But there's that gap. And so that bugs people. But that's the choice that we made, is that we think that that plastic cape has certain elements on it that couldn't be present on a cloth cape. Like for example, on Thor, he has those circles in the front, or he has that thing around his neck, for Infinity War. You can't do those with a cloth cape. And so those are just choices I made, knowing that that's just the best way to get the aesthetic we're looking for, even though it's not going to be as well received by maybe some photographers that would rather pose it with a cloth cape or so. So I keep that in mind. I also keep in mind, a lot of people like the fact that I approach things from a Lego aesthetic, try to keep the lines certain thicknesses that match Legos.
I think that's why your brand has such a wide appeal, honestly. That's why I mentioned you're sort of a gateway drug into the custom world, because they can see Lego in your designs, so they can seamlessly integrate it with their existing collection.
At least I try to. That's the approach I go with. And a lot of times, sometimes I'll find at the end, maybe I went a little too far and maybe there's more details than people would choose, or maybe not enough. But I always try to find it where it's just, you can find that balance where it's got the Lego aesthetic by the line depth or line widths and things like that. But at the same time, adding something special to it that maybe Lego, if they went the extra mile, it's so funny you'd say if Lego gave a crap. But they are getting, I think, I got to tell you, especially hearing interviews with guys like Citizen Brick, who know that they've seen, Lego actually put their stuff on their desk and things like that. I know that they do pay attention to some of the things that are in this world generally. So it does have an impact there. Because, I mean, we had just yesterday, was it yesterday, that the Bo-Katan fig? I mean, I can tell you, I guarantee that they saw certain figs that came out and were like, you know what, I bet they would like if this had arm printing. It would make that better, or that we changed the helmet print to be more like the character. I don't know if that did or not, but I just, when I looked at that fig, I thought, you know what? Yeah, let's say they did. I like that.
Let's say they did.
So to me, I personally think that as a designer, or the design team, they thought, you know what, this is what they'd want, is out of this figure to change those things. But anyway, I think the more that we as a custom community push certain boundaries that are within range, there's some things that just, you don't want it to be, there's a fine line between an action figure and a Lego figure. And, you don't want to go too far where it's action figure-y, but at the same time, why not try it and to see where that boundary is? Like Jin is trying things that are pushing boundaries, and so is Life Bricks and Jaka and me. We're trying, I less than others, but the more we can push boundaries, that are within range. I'm probably more incremental than other brands, but I'll see something that might work and I'll say, maybe we should try that on this next figure that's kind of in that realm.
Well, that actually brings me into my next question, because you've revisited previous designs with the advent of new technology and ink and paint or whatever. And so, for instance, you've got version 2 of your Amazing Spider-Man fig coming out, and then your re-released version 2 of Iron Spider, which was probably on everybody's top 10 list for that year. Are there any other figs that you're wishing to revisit because you have a better idea for the design, or because the innovations or molding technologies help you achieve your vision? And why is that going to be the collector fig?
So yeah, for me, there's a couple figures that I look back And I was looking at some of the things, and with the 10-year anniversary coming up, I was thinking, it'd be kind of fun to revisit maybe a couple of these. And I got some ideas how I'll approach them. But yeah, there's a couple that I'd like to do, knowing some of the things that we do, like with custom parts and what we could do with those that would make it even better, And I think enough time has to pass between the first version and the second. So for example, I just released, let's see, I'm trying to think of one that I released recently. Let's just say She-Hulk. I wouldn't re-release a She-Hulk this year. That's not something
Yeah, no,
that would be kind of, people would go like, that's kind of backwards. Why would you do that? So I wouldn't do that. But if there's something like 3 or 4 years ago that, now with all the different changes might look better, I'm always game for thinking of that. And so people are always, asking me if that's something, and I'm always open. If there's something that can be improved in a way, I might think about it.
I
And
will
I've
hazard
already,
to guess that the two figs that I see looked for most, like on the Geek Exchange and in my DMs and whatnot, is probably your Bucky Rescue Cat
oh yeah.
and the Collector. The Collector by far is the one I've seen for sale the least in the secondhand market. I think I've maybe seen it twice in 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And that's probably, yeah. So those are probably the two I would say the most that people ask about.
And maybe I might make a contest out of it and see which people think would be a good one to make. I don't know. It might be something that'd be kind of a fun. Maybe
I think the newer collectors will all say Cap, and the older collectors will all say Collector because they missed it. And they want
well, maybe
The problem
yeah.
is if you make a collector fig now, you're going to have to do a Grandmaster fig too. I need you to do a Jeff Goldblum face.
Oh God, yeah, that would be
That would be really good, wouldn't it? Yeah.
that'd be fun because he was actually missing a couple elements too. If you think of the Lego one, he had generally the things, but he was missing some of the.
It wasn't great. It was good, but it wasn't great. So yeah, we definitely want a nice custom one.
I've got the one
Your
by
faces are perfect for it,
Was
Yeah.
it
What
Dragon
other
Brick
thing?
or Diamond? Who did the customs? I think it was Dragon Brick, right? I mean, I really like it. The print on the cloth is beautiful, but I would love to see an Adam version of Jeff Goldblum.
It'd be fun to make. Yeah. Yeah. What else do you think, Phil? What other would be good ones to kind of think as a second approach as a collector?
I'm not sure. I mean, we know that you can show a real evolution. I mean, the best example of that would be for me your cap figs. Look at your first cap compared to your latest caps. It is it's almost like a completely different designer. So it would be interesting to see some of the older ones with something new. I think probably collector just for the masses, because that is a great fig. You released that one at a perfect time. It wasn't long after the Comic-Con fig itself came out.
Yeah.
Everyone's commenting just you basically improved on that fig in every possible way. You made it a real fig, whereas the Comic-Con one almost looked like a knockoff in comparison. It's I can't think of any off the top of my head actually. I've always been quite happy with the designs. I think
Deadpool's already coming out. That's been redone.
Oh yeah, yeah. Deadpool was definitely one that I saw that we could improve too with because it was kind of minimal print. I think I only did the torso and front legs, I think, and the arms, and that's all I did, I think, on that. And I there wasn't as much detail as I pack into figs now as when I look back. So a lot of you can see, like you were saying too, Phil, there's kind of an evolution that I when I look back at those figs, I keep, there's so many times like, oh God, that looks so terrible. But there's other times where I'm thinking, it's just it was a more simple Lego aesthetic back then, versus now. Even Lego, like we said with the Bo-Katan fig, has arm printing, leg printing, even top or front foot printing, So, things have evolved over just the last 2-3 years so much that I just think if you compared even a figure I designed like 3 years ago versus now, there's such a big difference in terms of what goes into it. So it's almost like I'm a different designer now than I was 3 years ago. So it'd be worth, reinvesting time into that character again to see what would I do nowadays. Is there something different I would do? And if there's need and want for that, I think it'd be kind of fun. At the same time, there's certain things like that Spider-Man head from the Tom Holland ones. I don't know how I would do that differently, but there's certain other aspects of it that I think I could do differently. That would be interesting to approach. There's certain webbing things on the head maybe I would change, but I think for the most part, I really like how the lenses turned out, and I think I've reused that as just a motif just because I was so happy with how it turned out. But there's other elements of the designs that I would definitely approach differently, and some of it's impacted by the way some other companies have kind of done it and that I liked, and certain things that I would kind of translate in my own version. But yeah, I'm constantly inspired by other companies that are in our space that do such great work. I hopefully inspire them back, and we kind of I think it's just over 2-3 years is just changed the way that we do things, and so it'd be fun to approach some of those older ones.
So again, great segue. My next subject is Adam the artist. You obviously put a lot of time and energy into these things, and over time, I've had a chance to develop a pretty good relationship with many brands. We talked about FOMO last episode, and we discussed the parasocial relationship that can develop due to brand loyalty. Meaning basically, we sometimes we buy fig we may not even care about, but only for the reason to support that brand that we've come to appreciate. So that being said, sometimes we regret those purchases because either we need to make room on the shelf, or we realize we didn't have the funds at the time and we need to raise funds for new figs or whatever.
Yeah.
In some cases, because the brand may put out a fig that appeals to that collector's taste a bit more. So my question to you, as a designer, do you ever take it personal when you see somebody who you know to be a big fan actually selling your fig?
No, I always understand. Yeah, whenever someone's like, when I see a particular figure of mine, just all of a sudden I'll see because I follow a lot of buy, sell, trade pages on or on Facebook or whatever. If all of a sudden I just start seeing like a particular figure just get dumped on the market, I'm like, it's like, oh, that's a shame. I kind of like that one. That's as far as that goes, really. I don't really take it personally ever. It's change, taste change, situations for people change for what they need and what they have to do in their own lives. So maybe they have to sell, but I don't think and there's times too where, I'll make something and I'm really happy with how it turned out, and every collector or lots of collectors did too. And all of a sudden another brand makes one and it just improves it and it makes it next level. And I can see that, because even as a collector, I might have even bought the same figure. And like a lot of people, the funniest story is whenever I take pictures of figs that I get on my desk here, and I have kind of like my favorites that I've made over the years on my desk. And people are always just stunned when they see that my Mando figure has Cold Blood's helmet on there. They're like, why would you do that? Why don't you like your own? I was like, well, I kind of like their helmet better, just to be completely honest. They did a good job on it, and I kind of wanted to see what it looked like on my figure, and I kind of like the marriage there. So it happens, where someone else makes a design that is just a little bit better or has a certain aspect that's better. And because of that, maybe one of my older ones or my previous one happens. I've seen it with a lot of collectors where they're like, I've had it for a while and this one's just better. I think I'm just gonna move it on. And it's a natural thing. Do I take it personally?
In my personal
Never.
case, that was more for me so I could sleep at night, because I sold a few of your figs recently.
Oh yeah.
Well, basically, like say for instance, like my tastes have evolved a little bit away from the Lego aesthetic and more towards the custom. So, like say for Iron Man, I've gone all in on Top Mountain, hoping to have a unified look across my Iron Man.
Sure.
So,
Oh yeah.
So the Lego aesthetic doesn't really fit well with the Top Mountain intricate design. I've set these rules for myself not to duplicate figs to keep myself from buying multiple versions, which was a problem for a while.
I think it's funny you say that too, because I get some feedback sometimes that were just, I even saw one on a comment on one of my posts yesterday, was just like, that helmet doesn't look Lego at all. Like looking at my Mark 50, I was like, oh, well, I tried to make it, like as Lego as I could. But I guess it's custom. But yeah, it's kind of like there's different levels of what's custom and so you kind of, like you said, after you get into the game, you feel what your level of customization and what's outside the boundaries of Lego. Like Lego will never do a wraparound arm print, but we like that. That's
Right.
I've even adjusted that. Like for example, I'm getting test prints this week from certain things. Like one of them's the Thor Love and Thunder blue suit, I guess you could call it, or something. And that's one of the first ones. I think it's the first one. Maybe it's not. It's one of the first ones that's pretty much wrapped around all the way from front to back. And I even looking at the picture through the plastic poly bag that production sent me just to show me what's on the way, I was looking at that going like, man, that looks really good. I like the way that 360 is. So I might be, I'm a convert now. And so is that too much custom versus
You heard it here
Lego?
first. Adam just changed his mind. He's doing side prints.
Yeah, no, that's one of those. That's like I can't go there. But there's certain times where I wish that was different. Like I had that and I didn't worry about the side scraping and stuff, where I see someone else did a design figure. I'm like, that does look a little cleaner that way. But at the same time, I know how much I've been. So here's the thing is I also not only sell minifigures, but I talk to people that collect them and have problems with them. So I get emails all the time about like this scratched off or this got chipped or can you fix this for me? Is there one that you got can replace it? So if I did decide, I just can imagine the nightmare scenario of custom.
No, I'm glad you're thinking ahead and putting huge, quality control ahead of, the demands of the masses, because I'll be honest, we're not thinking that far ahead. We're just thinking about what's going to be in our mailbox tomorrow.
Right, exactly. But at the same time, I do appreciate those brands that are pushing the envelope and doing that side printing but the only thing for me is that it raises the price of it, and is that worth it? And then for me, the biggest thing is the quality is going to scratch off or not. And I just don't buy that they've gotten to a point where that won't scratch off. And I know that there's certain experimental things that have been tried to put like almost like a coat on top of printing, but I don't think it has the Lego aesthetic then, so yeah, I don't think I'll ever change that one, but I won't say never.
I was I was really getting into the side printing until we had our last episode. And I was thinking, I literally came to this epiphany during the episode recording. I was just like, the fact is, we see these minifigures and these previews, we're all zoomed in. We're never holding it that close to our face when we actually have it in hand. Some folks, like Marcus, we have what we call Marcus vision. Like I put the little trademark symbol next to it every time I type it in chat. And he's got the macro vision built into his brain. And so he can see these things without any assistance from technology. But generally speaking, we don't really keep it to our face and stare at it. So when it's sitting on my shelf or it's in front of me on my desk, I don't even see the side of the fig because the arm's blocking it.
Yeah, and it's straight on.
Am I focused on that?
Right, and it's straight on for the most part. If you're looking at it, you're looking at what's straight ahead. That's why I always tell my printers, we have got to have the front head, the front torso, and the front legs and everything look perfect. That if there's anything that's off, you're going to get the ire of Adam from that. So because that's what's presented when you put it on the shelf and it's looking at you through that, whatever you use as your collectible space, you're seeing the front of that. And maybe if you're lucky, if you're walking by it, you see the arms and the side of the legs and things like that. But the side torso, you're right, is mostly covered with the arms. I know a lot of people have their different tastes. And so, that's why I'm glad there's different brands that do it that way. But for me, I just think there's too many downsides to side torso printing that I can't overcome at this point. And it bugs me every time I see a design that's a female that has the wraparound torso print. It's just like, oh, it doesn't look right. I'm glad there's a lot of different brands out there that try different things. So it's just one of those things that I have not bought into yet. And it's not something I think is worth the leap in there for me in terms of where we are in terms of printability and just the, like feeling you were saying or agreeing to is it looks different with that little silhouette from the side or on the front, that how did that wrap around? It just doesn't work, so.
It's funny you were saying about scratching off, and it was just making me think about your Mark II fig. Funny enough, actually, it was, going back to what we were saying about are there any figs I'd like to see done again.
Oh yeah.
So obviously Mark II was a chromed fig, wasn't it? And anyone who's been collecting customs for a while knows that chrome can be an absolute nightmare. I'm personally scared to breathe on that fig. I love the look of it, but I don't want to. Fingerprints alone are bad enough, but breathing on it, you're scared it's going to flake. So,
right.
Is chrome something that might have improved over time, or is it something you just wouldn't want to look at again?
Or would you maybe apply the same paints that you've been using for your Green Goblin and Iron Spider?
Yeah,
right. So that's what I was thinking. So here's the thing: is when at the time, that was the only way to get that kind of look, and that nobody had really done that at that point, at least as far as I know. There was kind of like there was this brand on eBay, and I can't even remember what their name was. They sold
minifigs.pl.
That's it. Thank you, sir. Yeah. So Phil, you know what I'm talking about. There was one that was there that was like a silver chrome, but it didn't quite have the Mark II design on it, but it looked close enough, so I got it. I remember thinking how cool it was in my hand. That there's nothing like that was the Mark II, so I figured, and it didn't have like I think it was like a simple, I don't know if it had a print on the front of the face or on the faceplate, but anyway, I just was like, we need to get that out there in that terms, and there was only 2 people that could make that at the time, and so I ordered from one of the groups to get just those parts all in silver chrome, and that was the best that we could do at the time. And I remember 2 muddy minifigures.
Yeah, automotive chrome, wasn't it?
Yeah, so he did. Yeah. So he actually used, like what they use at the auto parts place, where they actually just spray chrome on the parts of the car. The only problem with that is it adds such thickness to it. So yeah, it's durable, but you can't move the minifigure. It's like
Not just thickness, that weighs about 4 times the weight of a normal minifigure as
right,
well.
exactly. So like, not only could you not move your minifigure, you injure your hand every time you pick it up. It was one of those things that those were the only choices at the time. And nicely now we have this. I don't know what the magic is behind what is done at the production facility. I always ask, can we do this? And then they just come up with this great way to do it. I'm like, damn, that looks nice. And then we just do it from then on. So one of the things is when we had, right before I released the Mark 50, there was a figure that was done by somebody. And I was like, is there a way we could do that where we don't see the metallic effect, but it's still as shiny and smooth and durable? And so they did some research on it, and they came up with this one thing, and they sent me a sample. And I remember just trying to chip it on the edges and taking the hand in and out and rotating it all the time, and then just looking at it like, man, there's not a scratch. It didn't chip off. I was like, this might be the way forward. So we tried that, and I'm glad. It just took a long time. It's an expensive process to do those, but once it was made, it was totally worth it, because I think that's one of my favorite figures that I've made. And I'm proud of all the things I've made, but that one is like a centerpiece on one of my, on my desk here. I just love looking at it. It's just so shiny. It's unique. It has the color and the durability that I like. And I usually, don't toot my horn that much, but this one was just, I think it turned out so well that I kept thinking, I got to make some more like this. So what's difficult, and what I found was not, I just thought, oh, you just grab another color, right? So when I made that Green Goblin, it took a long time to come to the right color to get that Green Goblin look from the movie with the production company. But at the same time, when we finally got it, COVID hit, or it was maybe a little after COVID hit, but either way, the group that made the paints for them, that worked with them, went out of business, and they didn't send them the mix. So
Oh my gosh.
So that's why that took so long. We would have been 6 or 7 months before that, but they completely lost the mix. So we really had to start from scratch and incrementally just change it here and there, make it a little more of this, make it a little less this. And for 6 months, we finally came up with as close as we could get it to what was approved the first time. And then they finally put that together and mix it on there.
I mean, it came out great.
I think it came out as well as I possibly can make it. And I thought it looked I think it looked better in hand than it did when they were sending me pics, because I was nervous, sweating bullets when I saw the pictures. I was like, I think it looks good. Let's have the distributor send me pictures. And then finally some people got some in hand and was telling me what they thought compared to what we agreed on, and it looked close enough. And then I finally got it. I was literally like one of the last people to get it, I think, because I just got mine like a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, something like that.
The last thing you want to hear is it's good enough from your distributor.
Right. Well, I can never, they're not creative types. They're not the kind that are like, oh, this looks beautiful. They're like, can I ship this or what? But they can tell when there's things missing, or if there's something dinged, or if it doesn't match what I approved, those kind of things. In terms of when I finally got it in hand, I was like, thank God, it's exactly what I wanted. That's the color I was going for. But I was sweating bullets until I physically got it in my hand. Because pictures look fine, but they never, you can never tell what it's like in hand until you actually physically get it. So that's one of those times where I approved it, but sometimes you can approve something, and then when it goes through production, it can turn out a little bit differently than you approved. That's why I always have the distributors and the production send me pictures and send me to make sure that it matches. And they usually have the thing I approved right next to it so I can see.
Because the face came out really good. I love it. But that actually brings me to another point.
Yeah.
As an artist who puts in countless hours in the overall design, and Lego being modular in nature and varying tastes by collector, do you have any feelings when you see collectors fig barf other brands' parts into your design? You mentioned Sket earlier. He is probably the premier fig barfer in the superhero minifig community. That guy has visions and plans, and he puts them into action, and it's amazing the things that he pulls off.
Yep.
But you as an artist, when you're like, man, I got the singular vision of what this thing should look like. What do you mean you want to swap the legs?
Well, that's yeah. And it's like I said with Sket, I was like, oh, that's not the way I do it. But then he was saying like, we have different tastes, obviously, and I was like, it's very true. And that's the beauty of like what I say, that the variety is the spice, in this community. That it's nice. Some people see things differently, and I think that what's nice about Lego from the beginning is you can always swap things out, swap parts out, that's what Lego is, you know, it's building and making things your own and making it a certain way and being creative. So if that means, you know, creatively mixing and matching different brands, you know, that's kind of the way it is. And I think that's great. I've even done it, like I said, with my own, like I put Cold Blood's helmet on my own figure. So it's natural, I think, when it comes to Lego. That's kind of what it is. You know, Lego is supposed to be interchangeable and fun like that. So I actually kind of am always intrigued by the different ways that people put it together. I may not agree all the time, but that's what, you know, subjective. I mean, this basically is kind of art, you know, on a Lego minifigure. So to each their own, you know, if they want to mix and match with, put a Life Bricks helmet on a PCB head and torso and somebody else's legs and custom parts, you know, power to them. And it makes it easier for all of us brands, because then we'll sell our stuff still, even if we have mixed and, you know, the same thing. So I think it's great that way. But at the same time, obviously I have my own vision and what I think it should look like. And usually it's on my figure, but sometimes, you know, like when I get done and someone else makes one after me and it's like that little change is, you know, better, you know, it's almost like not a FOMO thing, but like as a designer, it's like, man, I wish I would have thought of that before. Like,
Can you think of an example?
I would love to share it, but I think I think my collectors would then look at that figure differently. You know what I mean? I don't want to do that. So,
No, I totally understand.
But there's 2 or 3 figures, and I get a couple friends of mine that are on Instagram that I chat with about this. They'll say like, what did you think about this? You know, like, and I'll say, honestly, I'll go like, you know, I think this is better in certain ways. You know, I wish I would have done that way. And they'll go like, really? You know, like, yep, that's what I would have done. I think it's better. And they're always surprised when I find some of their brands better than my own. Like I would have that, like, wouldn't I always take my brand? No, I always take whatever someone designs, in my opinion, looks better. A lot of times it's another brand. So for example,
That's a great trait to have, because there are some brands out there that think it's my stuff or nothing.
Yeah.
And it's not healthy.
Well, when you said about not being bothered about, you know, people mixing and matching parts, I could imagine some brand owners would go as far as to probably glue the parts together to prevent it.
Oh, well, I know for a fact that some brands would ban you from their private chat channels, like their WhatsApp or their WeChat, for insulting their vision.
And it's tough as an artist. You know, obviously you have such a vision for what you're trying to do, and gosh, I'm trying to think of the movie that I saw recently where it's like 2 artists that are sparring. And you know what I was thinking of actually was that movie by Christopher Nolan about the 2 magicians, The Prestige. You know, and they're trying out, and they get so mad that the other one outdoes the other one, but they know they can accept that's better than theirs. You know, and that's the way I look at it. But I don't want. It's not like I'd kill myself for that. Or
yeah, let's say don't start cloning
there's a
yourself
limit there, but at the same time, right? I won't be putting myself in, dunking myself in my own chambers and stuff. But yeah, for me, it's you know, I say this to people all the time. I'm a collector first and a fan of Lego first. That was something that was, you know, reintroduced to me through my kids, and I just enjoy doing it. You know, being around Legos, they're something I grew up with, and now seeing them at such a level is kind of fun. And now that I can express myself creatively with these is kind of another angle of that's also unique that I get to experience, and I'm lucky enough to work to the point where I can do that now. But I'm also, since I'm a collector, can also say, dang, that is a good job by so and so. I love what they did. Can't wait to get it. At the same time, man, my figure looks like crap now, you know. So it's a reality, but it's okay. It drives me to do better on my next figure, and that's okay. That's a good thing. You know, if it doesn't motivate you, you know, if you just go in the dumps and you're like, I suck, you know, you're not going to sell anymore and you're done. And
but this wasn't,
what was your point of doing this?
Question, but you've inspired me to think about this.
Sure.
You know, when Jaka announced their Mando in conjunction with Cold Blood,
yeah,
people were kind of raising an eyebrow, because obviously you had collaborated with them both with Cold Blood in the past.
Yeah.
So did you feel that this is going to be was a unique challenge, or are you nervous about how it's going to be received, because people might want their Mandos to match, or, I mean, just go ahead. I have really no answer for this that I'm looking for. I'm just curious about
I was
on this, because this was a surprise to a lot of folks. And,
yeah, so I've worked with Cold Blood for a long time. When I a couple years ago, when they made something that I thought was just like fantastic, and I was like, maybe it was the Mando helmet. I can't remember what it was. Yeah, it was the Mando helmet, I think, after I made my Mando. And I thought, what a great, I wish I would have had a helmet like that. These guys did a great job with that. And then we started chatting it up, and I told them that, like, have you ever thought of doing like just custom parts with my designs maybe? And I talked them into it, and we got into doing several figs together, and it worked out really great. And then, they had things that came up that they couldn't really, a lot of people know that we're communicating that they kind of went into boogie land. Like we couldn't talk to them for a lot of time, like 3 or 4 months, and in some cases more than that. And it wasn't, and when they came back, I asked, like, is everything okay? And, this is during COVID time, so who knows what happened, but I know that they had some things going on. I don't know if it was business related, things that they're doing in their personal life, but I could tell that there was something that kept them away. And they also had technical glitches with their communication. I know that they were either they couldn't get into Instagram or they couldn't get into their emails. I forgot what it was, but I had to make a choice at a certain point because we were going to collab on another figure after that. And I, as a brand, I couldn't keep sitting there waiting for them to come back. And at the same time, I understood what they were going through and that there's nothing they could do about that. So when they finally reemerge and I can communicate with them about certain things and we chatted about it, I think we both agreed, that they had some projects they really wanted to do and they wanted to focus on that. And I had some projects that I was already kind of knee deep in and I'd like to keep going. And so I either had to know what they would do it or not. And so it was kind of a mutual agreement. So there was no hard feelings and we both love each other's work a lot and we're huge fans of each other. So when they released that with them, I kind of figured, at first it was their Jango Fett. I think they did first. And I thought it was fantastic. That was what they wanted. They're big Boba Fett fans, obviously, and doing those kind of Mandalorian helmets and stuff. So that's something they want to do a long time, and they've been working on that. And it just so happened that Mando was something that Jaka and them probably discussed. So it wasn't like they, wanted to make their own.
Yeah.
Right. So I was actually really happy with it that they were able to make that they found another collaborator they could work with to do the projects they were interested in. And I know Mando just happened to be one that Jaka was interested in and probably, worked with them to do that. But I know they want to do some Boba Fett stuff, and Jango Fett was one of the ones that they wanted to do too. So I'm just, there is, a couple projects we just had to drop, just because I had to know that, I was like, is there any chance that this could happen again, that you guys could go, gone for 3 months? And if it is, I just have to, move on to somebody else to work
You
with.
have to do your risk assessment. Yeah.
Yeah. And we both agreed that, it's probably best, we had done some great projects together that maybe it was a good time that they went off and did their own projects and I did my projects, on my own with other collaborators. So it all worked out just great. Nice. I love the stuff they did. Like the Jango Fett they came out with Jaka was fantastic, So when I saw the Mando, it's just one of those timing things, I already had a lot of ideas that nothing changed from when I saw their stuff. I was like, well, we're just going to be around the same time, but like I said, I actually like the variety that all of us brands offer. So they offered something that's going to be different than what I'm offering. So they have some things that are similar, but it's one of those, I think people will just like having the option of like their taste matching, their look or versus my look. So
yeah, it sounds like the door is still open for future collaborations. So
always for sure. It's one of those things where I think I can just tell they found their niche. I think with Jaka, I think they're good friends as well. I think they've worked, they've been in like the same circles, so they understand each other's working. Whereas, me and Jaka were cold right out the gate. Like we just never met each other and then started chatting and liked each other. So it does make sense that they're working with Jaka, some people that they've worked with in the past and know. Yeah, I think their stuff that they were doing is great. But at the same time, I can't wait to show people what I've done with the next version. That's kind of a new take on, because the one I released the first time was technically made on the first season look. And people had always teased me like, dude, it's different in season 2, And I was like, yeah. but I noticed that finally when I was looking at it, I was like, there is quite a bit different. And, I do want to approach my helmet a little differently. So, and some other things as well. So, and I think I cannot wait. Another thing it's already done, but now since we're in Mando kind of season, that's kind of taking precedence. But I cannot wait to show you guys the Iron Man helmets that we've been working on. That's going to be, I think, something you guys are going to love. You kind of got a taste of it with the Mark V that came out last year, but this one's obviously more towards phase 1 kind of helmets. But I think you guys are going to like that, our take on that one. I've been working on that one for a long time too. So I think you guys are going to like the combos that I got for those. I don't usually talk about what's coming up, but that one, I think, that's one that I think also, I think we've been working on for
One
a
of
while.
85 armors is going to appear next.
So yeah, this one is another one that I think you guys are going to like too. But
Right now, your website is, pretty bare because you've not signed
yeah,
for it anymore.
I just can't do it anymore. Yeah, it's one of those.
I was gonna suggest that maybe you could probably even shutter your website and then just update your Instagram, curate it to be like a archival record of all your minifigs you've ever designed.
Yeah, I'm thinking. So I've been thinking about how to repurpose that because I've gone kind of down to a minimalist approach where it's just it's still up because it's obviously the link still goes there, and I just haven't had. I wish I had more time to do it, but I haven't gone on there to be able to redesign the look of the website. And so the only thing right now is you have to go to this link to lead to the my resellers to find my old minifigures or my collab figs. So that's still a work in process, but again, I just haven't had the time to do it.
Yeah, I saw a comment on, I think it was Minifigure Mercs, a recent review posted. Where do I find it? It's like I go to the website. There's nothing there.
Right.
So I think if you were to repurpose your website to say your homepage is just available at these resellers, and then the next page is just like the history of the things you've designed.
Mhm.
Keep it
Yep.
real simple, a 2-pager.
Or it might even be something as simple as just a redirect to my Instagram and to
Yes.
my resellers pages, and just have that as sections on there so they can just find out more about me at the places that I'm at, because I just don't
Great
have the
link
time to
tree.
do all that anymore, Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's something I've been chewing on. It's just haven't had the time because I've just been working mostly when I have free time to do the designs, and then work on the feedback mechanisms to all my different collab friends that are doing these works with me, and then also to the production so they know what to do to change things or to get things to where we need them to get produced and all that. So it's a really time consuming thing, all these different aspects. So
And
the
then
website has just
on
gone
top of
by.
that, your real life,
Yeah, that kind
your
of,
family.
yeah, that's yeah. And the thing is, I'm a family, so everything is obviously, my family and my kids come first, and so this is like a side gig on that. So anything that is in the Lego world has always come third, really, because it's my kids and my family, obviously my extended family, and then obviously keeping up things here at the house and all that. And like, for example, right before we got on here, I was still finishing cleaning up the dishes and finishing all the supper that we made tonight and all that. So I mean, that takes a majority of my time. And the website, just people are like, why don't you reopen it? Well, it got so time consuming as just one person. And I think people expect that I'm making just tons of money. Can I just hire people to do that? Well, there's so many hoops to jump through that. Did I really want to go that far? I don't. That's not. I just always wanted to do this as like a side hobby. Whereas, like Citizen Brick, they found a way to make that a business model to expand and make more things and keep it all in house. And I just never wanted to go that far. I always wanted to just keep it simple. And then when it got too big, I couldn't keep that website open. It was just too much work on a day-to-day basis. I think people don't understand how much goes into when you get to a certain level, especially how much you have to, if you really want to be a well-respected brand. I have always said customer service has to be the number one priority for me. People have to get responses within a certain number of days. They have to have their needs met for fixing things or to get in their orders and all that. And so if that can't be done, I just got to stop doing that. And that's what I decided. I couldn't do that to be at the level that I wanted to be at. So it was frustrating and really hard to do that decision at the time. And I hoped at some point I could reopen it, but I've just gotten to a space I don't see that happening again. So a lot of people are like, well, are you ever going to, reopen that thing? I don't think so. It's just, there's so many other resources for people to get my figures. I think circling back to that's just what happened. I remember specifically when I got a batch of figs in and I had to ship these, and I know people were antsy to get me to ship these. And so I worked on it feverishly, and it took me to get all those orders. I remember it took me 2.5 days. I had to almost take a sick day for one day at my work on the Monday following that. And I just thought, this is too much. I can't handle that myself. And I don't have the kind of capital to either handle hiring someone else to help. And who would I trust to do that? And also, is that the long-term vision I have for myself doing this? I've always went into this as a hobby, and just that turned into a business that just blossomed much more than I ever anticipated.
Do
And so
the people you work with know about Phoenix Customs?
The last place I worked, yes. For the most part, no. And the funny thing is my wife now starts talking about that to some of her colleagues, so they do know about it. So I'm always kind of bashful at first when they say, hey, I hear you do Legos. I'm like, yeah, I do. And then I tell them about it. And I try not to to overexcite, more than they're excited. But,
I just
Trying
think
to
you
nerd
said
out.
about taking a sick day. Just thinking, you come in the next day. They're like, oh, shipping packages, eh?
yeah, the funny
You know
thing
what
is,
you were doing.
right, exactly. And I think at my last work, there's only one other person that could tell, like, that's like what I was doing, that they're like, oh, I saw your website. I saw that, this is what you've been doing. I get that, it's busy stuff, huh? And I was like, all right, this person kind of gets it. So yeah, that this is a good part of my life now. It's just that I do this much effort into it that I probably should be okay talking about it. Before, like when I first started, it was like, do people think this is cool? Is this really, is it worth talking about? Like, is this something I want? So the only problem is, now it's kind of like, I still want to keep it in a mode where this is something that's more of my hobby versus my job. It's not I'm not, this isn't something I do every day, all the time.
Oh, what? This doesn't make you a millionaire?
Right, exactly. So, and speaking of I always think of that meme that came out from Ragnarok, where it's Kate Blanchett looking down on Taika Waititi on his iPad.
Yes.
And that's exactly what I always picture. Like whenever I'm like, honey, look at this great design minifigure, and she's looking down like, okay, great. But it's I think she understands that it's something I get a lot of joy out of. It's something it's something I can put in time when the kids are away, and that it's a nice hobby. So I like to keep it at that level still. But I've been doing it for so long now that it's kind of nice whenever I meet someone that's like, oh wow, you can customize a Lego? How do you do that? And then talking about that, and it's become more of like that. Yeah, that's a big part of my life now. That I can celebrate that and talk about it openly and be like,
Well,
that is a big deal.
You are blowing up, man, because again, with COVID and people sitting at home being on the internet surfing, and then next thing you know, you got, MFG Customs and you got Mini Superheroes Today hawking your stuff on their YouTube channels and introducing us to a whole new world of customs. I've never seen it before. And
Yeah, it's the custom scene has blown up quite a bit. Not only just when it went to Instagram versus Flickr, which is more of a contained, smaller group. I just feel it's gotten bigger on Instagram, and then a whole nother level when like you said, in COVID, where I think people just had time to invest and go like, I'm going to be here all day. I could probably build a Lego set, and then I'm really interested in this thing like Marvel or Star Wars, and oh, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. I'd like to try that. And then they dabble, and then they look online and they find a picture maybe on a Google search or something, and next thing you know, they're on Instagram and they get in the community. And so I think it just bloomed, like you said, through YouTube and Instagram and all that the last few years, and all these brands that have blossomed up and are doing amazing jobs creating their own customs and stuff. And so it's been really fun to watch it grow the last few years and to see how it changes over the years with ability to customize, like helmets, hair pieces. I remember back in the day when I would not even think of a custom hair piece. I'd just work with whatever Lego had out there. Whereas nowadays it's almost like, oh, you're just using a Lego hair? Really? I'm going to get that probably in one of my releases coming up. But one of those things, it's almost expected just because of how far things have come in the community. But it's an interesting time to be a collector, that's for sure.
do you get a chuckle when you see like those YouTubers, display your reviews of your stuff, and their audience is usually a younger audience, but also more of a purist community. And they're like, "Oh, that looks terrible. That looks nothing like Lego."
Well, that's always the first
garbage.
thing. Yeah.
That's overpriced plastic.
Right. They're like, you paid how much for that? And it's just like, yeah, I totally get that. Like, that's the first, like when you're talking about like, do people at my work know about it, or like before other people that are that we meet know, the first thing they'll just like, their faces drop when I tell them like the price of one of these things, what they sell for. They're just like, are you kidding me? And people buy that? I'm like, yes, because they understand like how much goes into it and how it's unique and blah, blah. But even that explanation, people's faces are just like, what?
Well, you've got to be into this hobby to understand the cost. I mean, you can't tell anyone. No one ever believes you when you say, I've just dropped, $80-$90 on a little minifigure.
Exactly. Right.
It's a balance, because you don't want to come across elitist.
No.
You're like, oh, I collect custom minifigures, and I paid this much for them or whatever, or I've sold it for this much. But you want it, you get jazzed about talking about it, and there is, like you've already named all the factors involved and why these costs sometimes get elevated. But what advice would you give to all these newbies that are coming in?
Oh yeah, collectors.
The ones crossing over from the Lego community that don't understand this is not like Amazon where you just order and it comes to you, or
Yeah, no.
these aren't mass produced. What advice would you give to them to get situated?
Well, first, I just tell them to get to know and talk to as many people in that community as like you, Brett, and Phil, just talking to people that have been in for a long time to get an idea of what they're getting themselves. Like, what kind of thing are they looking at? What does this mean when they're seeing figures, and why does it sell for this, and what goes into that? I think talking to other collectors is a great first step. Getting into the community. I mean, first of all, Lego communities, from what I've experienced over the last 10 years, are just fun places to be, to chat up with someone else that likes something that you're into. So hopefully you enjoy just communicating with people. So get together with other collectors on Instagram, Facebook, you name it. I know on Snapchat, or not Snapchat, what's the
WhatsApp, I'm guessing, is it?
yes, like WhatsApp,
Yeah.
and like other chat functions. Like, get into those groups, chat with them, get to know them, and then ask them about it. Because then I think the more that you chat with people that are in that, will give you an understanding of the community and what it's like and what goes into each one of these figures and why it's the prices they are. And I think they'll understand that a little more. The first thing they have to understand is that, Lego, when they sell theirs at such a small price, per figure, it's because they're making like 10,000 or 100,000 of them. And so at that price point, it's very, it's like a penny per piece, 2 pieces, whatever. But ours are at such a minuscule number. So like, we're talking like anywhere from, I've seen some as small as 20 per, up to 500 per, like with Citizen Brick, when they do some of their releases. So it's still very limited if you look at that in comparison to like
I've seen
any
as limited
brand.
as 5.
Yeah, it's as small as.
Feelings with the pink fig sometimes go as low as 5.
And I think that even like recently there was the abnormal. I think they made a really limited number of those gold or kingpins. Yeah. So anyway, so the big thing is understanding like that impacts the cost of that figure, because of, as you go smaller in number, the price of that thing to make goes up. And then when you're talking about pad printing versus UV, you can be any, like, there's places you can buy those kind of printers and print it almost in your house if you really want to spend that kind of cash, and then you can pay for it after 3 years of making minifigures and selling them. But whereas pad printing, you have to go to professionals to do that. Now you can pad print in your own house. It's going to take you months of doing that to learn how to do that with like a single cheap printer, but the inks get expensive, and learning how to make those, and you still have to make the printing plates themselves, which are very, if you want to make them well and really sharp, those are expensive plates. So it's not an easy thing to just jump into and do in your house. You have to do that with professional printers and producers, and it really takes a long time of working with those people to get them to do that. But that's one end of the cost, and then you also have to enter the fact that you have to buy these parts in bulk, or in numbers, and then ship them to the people that make those. Then you also have to pay for the shipping to and from those resellers. You have to pay for the custom parts to be made. So these custom parts are injected into machines, and those take a long time to calibrate and get right. A lot of times, you'll have something well designed, but it still doesn't come out right from the press, and you have to tweak things. So a lot of money goes into making those things. And now, luckily, some of these brands pretty much, they're almost spawned from like people that worked at those places and understand those processes. I can guarantee that, I have an inkling, I'm sure, that Jen had to have worked with those people before to understand how to design those parts to uniquely, change them so that they can work with Lego parts so well. So I think there's a lot that goes into making those parts also. So all those things are expensive because of the numbers that you're making, which are so low. And so that drives up the cost. And so that's why these things are so expensive, is the fact that it's at a low volume, which is hard for those, production facilities to really put time into, unless it costs almost the same as if they made a whole bunch of them for another company. So that's something they have to consider too.
All right. Wow. Phil, before we close out, do you have anything else you want to ask, or?
I've probably been quite useless in this, but I spend too much time fangirling and listening, really, than filling in. And the way this works is Brett will ask the hard questions, so I ask the easy ones. So I've got a couple of things. First one, pretty much every interaction I've had with you, Adam, has been very tame in the sense of language. So for me and for everyone, will you drop an F-bomb for us? We haven't used ours up yet, so.
Well, I guess I can fucking do that.
Yes. I've never heard you do it though. Seen you type it, so that was on my bucket list. That's now off.
Oh, that's
He literally did say that in a DM to me today. He's like, I'm going to get out to swear.
oh, that's fucking great.
That's two. We're
You
under
got two of
for
them. You got two of them. That's it. Okay, I gotta go
Correct.
wash up my mouth with soap. I'll be back.
Correct me if I'm wrong now. I might have just dreamt this at some point in the past, but was there at some point some talk of you possibly doing some Miles figs from the Spidey game, Miles Morales?
From the game?
Yeah, was there ever serious talk about that, or was it just something perhaps you'd mentioned in a comment in passing or something? Or
Well, I can say yes. There was and there is. So something might be coming that's related to it at some point.
okay,
I think that
I'm just wondering what's up with it. Asking for a friend, you know, the guy,
Yes,
the guy sitting opposite us digitally.
it's one of those things where it's one of those things that's it's done and it's actually ready to go in terms of like I could just put it on a pre-sale, but it keeps getting bumped by things that are more current. But I will say I'm super happy with how it turned out. It's definitely one. It's not one that you guys would expect either.
We're asking because there's so many nice Miles suits in that game, you know, some unique creations just for the game. It does, you know, it would be some of them as well, especially with the you when you do the game designs, you go back to that very vibrant look like you did with the earlier figs, you know, the comic based figs like Kinetic Man, and it would just be lovely to see the vibrancy and the accuracy of your design come into those figs. You know, it'd be lovely. Me and Brett have said many times we would take one of every one you've, you know, every suit basically. But yeah, I mean, that actually leads me into something else I wanted to ask. Is with the Miles figs, I wonder if perhaps maybe it's just too much time has elapsed since the release. So is that something that happens to you quite often? Do you find that there can sometimes be an issue that maybe a design is taking too long and you feel like the demand for it has gone cold? Or
it's a little bit of both because you know how I was talking earlier about how, you know, I just keep coming back to it until I'm happy with something. That was one where like the design itself took a while to kind of be in a happy place because it was a design that one of the suits that really appealed to me in terms of design, like the way it really just it was so much more different than any of the other suits. I thought it just looked fantastic, something that we had to have in the community that nobody was making. And so I wanted to get that design right, and I was really picky about certain aspects of it. And then I got happy with that, but then the problem was certain parts of the parts that were involved to make the figure look a certain way, I wanted to get exactly right too. And so we had been tweaking them for months. And I think this thing has been ready since probably December-ish, January-ish maybe. And it just kept getting bumped by other ones because it's actually in a collab with somebody that I'm already doing these collabs that have been released instead. And they have reshuffled it along with me kind of in agreement. Just say, let's take advantage of, you know, this is a design we're ready for too, that is actually more, you know, in demand and people would really like to see this. So let's just wait. Cause I mean, the game was already out for when did that game come out? It was like 2 years ago by now, right?
It's
Yeah,
new
about 2
because
years,
it came out to PC in December. So
Oh,
that's my
true.
point.
That is
thinking-
true.
Spidey 2 is going to be out this year. I was thinking maybe something might be holding back on until perhaps these suits come back into the game, because I imagine they'll have all the suits from previous games plus new ones again in the next
Right.
one. So yeah.
And I think right now we have it slated for late spring to come out. So I'm hoping that we can stick with that because I think there's kind of like a lull in terms of things that are kind of in demand at that point, that I think it'd be a perfect place to drop that. Because I think it's one that I've been wanting to release for probably 6 to 7 months now. It's just like I said, it's just one of those things where I'm such a stickler. I don't rush things to get it out. I want to get it right and get it to look the way I want it to, so that you guys can enjoy it too, just as much as I would. I think this one will hopefully be one of those that you're just like, dang, that looks sweet. I got to get that. Even though you guys are both signed up just because it's a Spider-Man fig, but I think hopefully other people that aren't even into Spider-Man figs will just go, dang, that looks cool. I got to get that.
Well, to be fair, I think you'd probably doing yourself a favor not pumping out another Spidey fig right now until the other ones are complete.
Yeah. Well, that's what I told too. Is
we don't want to start a revolt.
Right. Yeah. And I actually told Rex, I said, you know, just to be right with the customers, we can't, until we get these things done, to release anything else, just to be, because I mean, they've been waiting that long. The nice thing is we both have gotten word from the printer that we'll be able to doing a freebie We're just working out how that'll work logistically because that could be a nightmare. But we have a good idea for a fig that we'd like to include with that. So we're working on the logistics of that. Hopefully Rex isn't going to listen and go like, "What the hell did you say that for?" But the thing is, the person I'm collabing this one with isn't Rex, so I can say that much too. So it's one of those things where we've been working on it because it was kind of outside. I felt that this was more of a game-based one, whereas the other ones that were all kind of related to the movies. So I think that's kind of a different realm. I think you guys will like this one when it comes out. Hopefully late spring / early summer, and that's hopefully when all the other
I'm gonna
spiders
DM you a guess because I think you've already told me this a long time ago.
Yeah, we'll see.
I'm gonna DM you a guess, and we'll.
This sounds. I'm open to that. How about Phil? What else you got for me, buddy?
Similar question to the last one, really. That obviously you've got a certain design aesthetic, and sometimes I imagine you have to sort of cater a little bit to a younger audience when it comes to your design language as well. So, are there any characters, not necessarily superheroes, could be anything, any characters that you wish you could do, but perhaps don't really fit in with the brand so well?
Yeah, because I mean, I've always, I'm a kid of the 80s, number one. So anything 80s related that was iconic back then, I've always been wanting to do. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, fortunately, Lego's made a lot of them that were good. Like, for example, I don't have to go to the Ghostbusters. Those have been knocked out of the park. I'm good with that. But I've always been interested in things like, I saw that LCM did a really cool RoboCop. Christo did one earlier, but I've been waiting only for about 3 years for that one. Let's see what else was the other. So there's Terminator was one growing up, but that one
we
has
need
done really well.
We need an 1800 endoskeleton.
This is true. And the other one that I thought would be, I love CB stuff, but their design style is different than mine. One of my favorite, actually probably one of my top 3 80s movies was Ferris Bueller's. So
Yes.
I've always wanted to do one of those, but I just always worry that, is that really too niche? Is there not really that kind of a demand for one of those kind? Same with actually another show that I liked, actually me and my daughter got into, was called Sherlock. And so, but that's also, is that too niche? If it's too small, is it going to be, because I mean, it does take up a lot of production time and all that nowadays. I have to kind of have that in my mind in doing some of those, but if there was a way to do it in small volume like that, it'd be kind of fun to do those kind of designs. I've always liked those. And then there's also a bunch of, God, what were some of the ones that were kind of, trying to think of the ones that were kind of outside the bounds of like a Lego, except, because they don't do violence as much and stuff like that. Of one of the movies. Yeah, I can't think of off the top of my hand, but there's a couple that I was like, well, they won't do it because of the violence involved with them and stuff. But now they're doing, like I remember Deadpool was one that was right off the bat that I did originally, and then I read. But yeah, anything that's kind of like off their radar that way has always been kind of appealing too.
Go ahead and check your DMs, Adam. I just sent you a photo.
Did you?
I want to see if I guessed right. I swear we talked about this before, the Smiles figure.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's correct. But don't share that. That's
No, dude.
Yeah,
how many things can I blackmail you with releasing?
This is true.
You've shared.
I'll also say this is probably one of the only times I think that you've gotten a preview of something before anybody else has. I think I've kind of kept that to me and my other design friends. So this is. I think that's.
You've got to let him tell me now, Adam.
Now, Phil, just because you're in this little circle, you might have to.
Right, I'll let Phil know later.
But Phil, I'm gonna have
after Phil gives me his Muddy River Carnage.
Oh,
there you go. There you go. Blackmail him. You got to blackmail him.
I'm gonna send you a picture of my collector fig waving to you later. Now.
Nice.
All right. Now, I thank you for confirming that, because I am very excited now.
Yeah.
That was what I was hoping for.
I don't know what it is yet, but I'm excited. So
I think it's one I've really wanted to do. The minute I saw that come out, I was like, oh my God, I got to do that. So it's been interesting to sit on that one for a while and then not be able to and get to a point where I was happy with it until recently. So, but we'll see when I can get that one out to you guys.
Well, now I'm just going to bug you every week about it.
Damn it. I knew it. I'm just kidding.
Shit. Hey, Phil, I think Adam blocked me.
Suddenly asking, where's this fig? Adam asking for a friend.
That's right. Phil will be your front man from now on.
All right. Well, listen, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I appreciate you for sticking around for as long as you have. This has been amazing.
Oh, you don't have to twist my arm. Talking about this is easy. So this has been a pleasure, man.
I'm contemplating making this a part 1 and 2.
Well, not just that, but I mean, just the amount of work you're gonna have to put into if you wanted to cut this down to an hour. My God, I couldn't
But
imagine.
I want to have, well, regardless, I want to have it all available when we premiere on Sunday. But this was amazing. I appreciate your earlier feedback on the first two episodes, the insights you've given to us inside the industry and what you go through. I really did want to humanize the brands involved. I'll put this out there. This is being the first to be known. Jaka has also agreed to be interviewed sometime
Great.
next month.
Can't wait to hear
So,
that.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And maybe in the future I can get Cross Check and Mini Bigs and Joe from Citizen Brick, and I'd love to get everybody together and again humanize the brands, let them understand there's more than going on than just I order, you make, and that's how it should be.
Yeah, and did you see also that we're all collectors slash fans too. This is something that it's a hobby first. You got to understand this isn't something we get into just to make money. If it was, we were really stupid to get into it. But I think the biggest thing is just understanding I've been a collector and fan of Lego for a long time. And then this just happened to be one of those golden things that all came together, and I've been lucky enough to do it continuously. So hopefully people can see through podcasts like this and chatting with me on Instagram, because I'm always open. I answer DMs all the time. If I don't, it's because you've been writing 6 of them that I've already answered and you're just not getting that. I'm trying to say this is it. I'm always very open to talk, and I try to be as accessible as I can. Obviously it's hard to do, but Instagram has made that a little easier. And I always, if you're someone that wants to learn more about what it is to be customizing in Lego and what it takes to do that, I'm always open to give you feedback on what you need to do and where you can look for resources. The only question I can't answer is, can I work with your guys? Because I wish I could, but unfortunately they're just so busy. I wouldn't be able, there's no way that they can get in there. So don't ask that one, but I'm open to any other question, like what does it take to do pad printing? How much does it take to get started? Those kind of things. I'm always open to that. So I always love seeing new people get invested in this kind of area and to get into the community. So anything I can
There's
do.
plenty of room. There's no room to be gatekeepers for sure.
Exactly, for sure. And it's much more, and to be honest, it's much more open nowadays than it was when I got into it. I mean, Christo was maybe a little bit of Eclipse Graphics, but Crystal was like the only person pad printing, so you had to go through him to get a minifigure. So imagine where we've come since then. That was what, 2016, 15, and now there's so many people that you can go through, and even local printers you can work with in your own countries and stuff that it makes it a lot more
designs, yeah.
Right. And so, and I think there's also more people into Lego now. So there's more designers that are in the community, more people that do CAD and things like that, and more resources available online. So it's a much better time to get into it then. It's just, it's a hard leap to do because you got to invest money and take that risk. But I think getting into the community and just talking to people, like we said earlier, is the first step. And hopefully, if they have questions, I'm there to help them. So
that's great. That's really appreciative. And so we're going to go ahead and bookend this, and end it the way we started, and remind you that you need to make a Squirrel Girl fig for Sket.
That's right. Sket, all right. I am convinced. I have been convinced by these guys. I will add it to the slate. You can thank both these brothers, Phil and Brett, for getting that on the slate for year 10.
Perfect. Now he's just going to give you some consultation on which version to do.
Right. Exactly. I got to get educated.
All right. So that being said, again, thanks Adam for showing up, and thanks Phil for sticking it out. I know it's probably extremely early in the morning for you. What time is it right now?
Oh God,
just gone 3.
Jeez.
Oh, Phil, get your sleep, man.
Honestly, guys, I have thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of it. It's brilliant.
This has been a blast. This has
nice
been
to talk to
everything I
Adam
hoped
for
it
the
could
first
be.
time. Never spoken before.
I know.
I'm
so glad to finally talk to you, Phil, man. As long as we've known each other and been around the community. So it's good to talk to you, especially to hear that awesome accent of yours. And you get a little bit of my Minnesota accent, so you get to have some of that.
Yeah.
But thanks for having us, Brett. It's been a pleasure, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe, another, we'll do a follow-up in another year or so after I cycle through other interviews and all these other, episodes that I got planned. So that being said, again, thanks Adam for showing up. Thank you, Phil, for sticking around till about, you said it was 3 a.m?
Yep.
Good Lord.
What a trooper, man.
Yeah. And currently slated for episode 4, we're going to bring Jamel's Bricks on board. He's a relatively new collector who's made fast-tracked in getting situated within this community. And we're just going to figure out what his secret was and let him share his experience as a newbie collector for those who might be trying to break into this hobby from the onset. So, okay, that's all we got. So until next time, take care of each other, take care of yourselves, and we will see you next time. Bye. And that concludes our interview with Adam of Phoenix Customs. His transparency and graceful responses to some difficult questions are most appreciated. Secondly, thanks to Phil for staying up late to help co-host, and I've linked to Phil's Instagram in the show notes so you can swing by and show him some love. Lastly, if you wish to lend some support to keep this podcast and other community initiatives going, there is a Buy Me Coffee link available in the show notes. Though never obligated, it's always appreciated. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.
I want you on my rack. I want to make you ring. I want you to unwrap. I want to pull your string. Bring me the next